Hello ladies and gentlemen. To start, Outer Wilds is the type of game that does not support a spoiler-free commentary, so please play the game if you haven't already and come back to this video later. Otherwise, this commentary will ruin the entire experience. I also warn you to not look up anything online about the game since even the main gimmicks spoil significant moments. For all intents and purposes, this commentary expects that you have played the game. If you haven't played the game and you're not convinced to give Outer Wilds a playthrough, I'll provide an actual spoiler-free summary. Outer Wilds, at its core, is an unrestricted, free-roam, physics-driven exploration adventure game where the only barrier between you and the end goal is knowledge. Only knowledge stops you from completing the game within the first 20 minutes of playtime, yet a playthrough lasts upward of 20 hours. There are no skills, upgrades, weapons, items, consumables, or RPG systems. Equipped with nothing but a couple tools and our curiosity, we embark on a melancholic journey to discover beautifully terrifying planets and a long-extinct civilization whom's cataloged their history, goals, feelings, insights, and observations. All in all, there's nothing else quite like Outer Wilds, and there's no guarantee that there ever will be. Timber Hearth perfectly paces out its tutorials and initial mysteries, and the first moment you spend playing the game is no exception. Outer Wilds begins without a cutscene or expository, yet without moving our camera, we're already fixated on and fascinated by our very first mystery. The explosion in the sky accomplishes more in less time than a cutscene would, all while remaining part of the player-controlled experience. Welcome to Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds dumps us next to a campfire with some marshmallows and a Hearthian named Slate. Slate serves to provide some useful context to introduce the game before we run off into the town proper. From the first two sentences, we learn that we're a pilot who graduated from the space program who's set to leave on her first solo voyage, and they regard launch day as significant enough to warrant a pre-launch campout. The first dialogue choice already provides insight into Slate's insanely carefree lifestyle. What do you mean you're sure you fixed the retro rockets? It only happened once? Oh, you mean several times? Great. Slate offers a bit of direction as well, but the level design already serves that purpose. The elevator prompts for launch codes, and there's only one path forward. Nonetheless, the instructions also serve as context for why we're here, so we're not aimless and confused. Slate's additional dialogue options only further cement the reality that innovation, such as space travel, comes down to trial and error and experimentation. How do the Hearthians know if it's safe to repurpose a spare oxygen tank as an extra combustion chamber, unless they try it? How can the Hearthians implement more features to mitigate pilot error unless pilot error has already proven to be an issue in past launches? Coincidentally, in a few moments you'll see Porphy confirm their trial and error lifestyle. Slate is the first of all Hearthians to be named after a rock. Slate is a foliated metamorphic rock formed through the metamorphism of shale. Perhaps the fact that he's named Slate and not Shale correlates to a more experienced Hearthian. Slate is also far more durable and attractive than Shale. So far, despite his apparent recklessness, I'd choose Slate as my soulmate without a second thought. I'm really quite impressed that a dating sim was built into this game. Micah introduces us to a model ship, which according to her and Slate is just like the real thing. I have a hard time believing that since the model ship is more difficult to handle and recover from mistakes. However, the difficult maneuverability makes for an engaging enough minigame instead of a trivial simulator. An emulation of the real ship would realistically be useful for our character, but for us would only prolong the time between the pre-launch campout and spaceflight. An emulation would most likely bore the player, then they would wonder why they aren't flying the real thing instead. Due to the model ship's size and lack of rotational control, the game exaggerates the model ship to showcase how small inputs can result in large or dire consequences, and that lesson is by far much more useful and engaging to the player than a trivial practice scenario. In fact, the model ship equates to a model plane in real life, so Outer Wilds nailed the experience of flying a model aircraft. Moreover, if you master the handling of the model ship, then the real one will be easier to handle. It's like when Rock Lee took off his weights. Yeah, heck yeah, look at that. Micah though? Whew! Apparently, the most prominent characteristic of the rock mica isn't their aptitude for model spaceships, but is rather their near-perfect basal cleavage. Although I'm concerned when I hear basal's definition forming or belonging to a bottom layer or base. I have no idea what this means for mica's basal cleavage, but it might be a deformity I may never get used to. Porphy produces sap wine for the village. Porphy is short for porphyry. Traditionally, porphyry refers to the purple-red form of porphyry, which is valued for its appearance. However, porphyry deposits form when columns of rising magma cool in 2 stages, one of which occurs in relatively shallow magma. I'd rather stay away from red-hot and shallow personalities who value their appearances. Porphy seals up not only batches of sap wine for aging, but one of my favorite jokes of the village. The Hearthians' comments on the experimental nature of the space program and their life in general are honest, but also said in jest and as punchlines. They're funny while setting a more grounded expectation of their trial and error space program and life. Frankly, I'm not sure how they're still alive. Even though Hearthians may scare us with all these mentions of fire and structural collapses, at least they scare us with an unbridled enthusiasm. Or we can internalize their reckless abandon in our space adventures. In fact, Outer Wilds' time loop system encourages reckless abandon and experimentation with both the astrophysics and planets. The game doesn't induce real consequences for our actions since the time loop only resets our location. We keep our progress via our ship log so nothing of value is lost. Regardless of whether the player approaches the game recklessly or carefully, the lack of consequences allows a freedom to play around with the astrophysics in other systems like the black hole. Moments like a player orbiting the sun to land on the sun station couldn't happen otherwise. And don't worry, we'll get to that. Thus far, we witness Hearthians just about disaster and more disaster and incredible disaster, but it's very clear that they have an enthusiasm and passion for space. Earlier in the game's development, the Hearthians' comments used to be more antagonistic, and so the player would be less excited about space travel.
There were a lot of problems with that version of the village, but people also just weren't excited to go into space because everyone they were talking to was like, why would you do that? Why would you go explore the cosmos? Really early on, they were like kind of antagonistic about the idea of going into space. It was like, okay, we're gonna make, the player's gonna be the one who's like excited to go into space and everyone else is like, don't do it. Like, oh, this is having the opposite effect. And so Kelsey and I talked and came up with the idea of, okay, you're the newest astronaut in the space program, your village has a space program, people actually want to do this stuff. It's a bit quirky, but we're gonna get you excited about space by having everyone else on some level be excited about space.
The town is thankfully no longer antagonistic and leans more toward a realistic optimism. That really sells both the town's community and our characters' enthusiasm for space travel. The space program feels like a real endeavor undertaken by a passionate and curious species, even more so once we find the first astronaut's pilot seat, the sky shutter satellite display, and other space gear in a nearby tent, and later on a museum that showcases major achievements and discoveries of our people. The Sky Shutter satellite doesn't introduce us to the Little Scout as a tool quite yet, but instead the game uses the orbiting Scout as a fascinating display piece for the type of technology the species has built. The Scout or satellite's images project a rather small planet. In fact, you can see and feel the planet's curvature just by walking around. You may also notice the satellite fly overhead and ask, wow, this satellite seriously orbits a planet using nothing but real gravitational force? The answer is yes, baby. Outer Wilds is all about that sweet astrophysics. Then we meet Marl. Marl really wants to chop down that big old tree.
Yeah, it's really something, isn't it?
Marl was originally an old term loosely applied to a variety of materials, most of which occur as loose earthy deposits. Therefore, he feels a bit unhinged yet down to earth, and I admire his capacity to dream big. I'd trust him over Slate to protect me. Nearby sits Nice. Nice is one of the most important NPCs in the game because she created the Hearthian instruments. Instruments and music shape their culture so much that they created the signal scope, a tool that tracks down the other Hearthian space travelers as long as they're playing their instruments. I'm surprised they chose to track sound waves since they cannot track dead bodies to bury their dead, but otherwise we can presume the space travelers play their instruments often enough so the signal scope is consistently useful in their day-to-day life. More importantly, would Gneiss be a nice soulmate? Gneiss is a high-grade metamorphic rock formed from the high temperatures and pressures of life. Gneiss displays distinct foliation with alternating layers composed of different minerals. She must be quite wise and experienced, but also old and far out of my league. She deserves better than a gamer. Tephra and Galena test our signal scope with a game of hide and seek. Unfortunately, Tephra's question does not accurately represent the gameplay available through this option. I assumed I would hand over my signal scope to the child and he would break the delicate object. Who in their right mind would ever trust a child in this circumstance? So I said, no, I'm not handing over my signal scope, and missed this entire minigame. In terms of gameplay, this signal scope practice means we're more likely to use the signal scope out in space to find important landmarks. Furthermore, Galena's hiding spot in particular encourages exploration. Tephra, on the other hand, should be ashamed of his awful spot. I can't blame him though, since he's not very useful as fragmental material produced by a volcanic eruption, whereas Galena is useful as a source of silver and lead. What do you know, the quiet and patient child Galena is much more valuable and an easy choice between the two.
That looks delicious and wet. Ah, yes. Refreshing. Is there... Oh, shoot. Did I die?
Did you just die? Oh my gosh.
Spinel fishes with his fishing pole. It's no wonder he recommends Giant's Deep, the water planet. I'm surprised at the absence of a fishing mechanic in this game, but I can't complain since instead we can cook marshmallows over an open fire. I'm glad Outer Wilds took the liberty to set up a different relaxing activity than the usual fishing we see in other games. Spinel tells us a story about Gabbro and the mysteries of Giant's Deep. Outer Wilds loves to offer different dialogue options to create interactive storytelling opportunities, such as our Hearthian screaming or expressing skepticism when Spinel mentions a tentacle of some hideous beast. Each option tends to invoke exclusive dialogue. For example, it's possible for Spinel to either like or dislike us depending on how we react or the option we choose. After the Nomai statue connects to us, it's possible for Hal to recommend Giant's Deep or Attlerock depending entirely on our response. The NPC's dialogue branches off of our dialogue choice, then merges back to the main dialogue tree if our conversation continues past the relevant player choice. It's a common but effective method to present player agency without the chance for the player to miss something important or the need for the game studio to write obscene amounts of branching dialogue per player choice. Further along the path, a kid named Arcos throws rocks into the ghost matter to draw our attention, much more attention than a camera and an invisible substance would draw otherwise. We detect ghost matter from the Scout's camera feature. The invisible ghost matter in and of itself is quite a curiosity. However, we also learn that ghost matter is at least hundreds of thousands of years old, and there used to be much more of it in our star system. I dare say we're quite intrigued by the amount of information and mystery compacted into such a small space. Moraine encourages us to test our signal scope to pick up the sound of Rebec's banjo and provides the perfect lookout point to do so. Next door lies a scout launcher and Tektite's note describing smoke from a crater up north, so not only are we given a scout launcher to play with, but a particular location to find, sorta like a minigame. The Scout's pictures also showcase possible locations to explore later on.
It's just a bunch of neat mechanics that I've never seen before. And I like how it gives you little tutorials.
Oh yeah,
I think the tutorial is so well done.
That looks refreshing.
Oh,
shoot! No! Oh.
I guess that's good for you, because now you know there's stuff down there for future that you'll never get to explore because you've died.
Once I get myself a scuba suit.
The Hearthian village thus far is chock full of personality, information, and minigames or interactive pieces. The most prominent of these minigames floats at the end of the Zero-G cave. On the way there, however, the cave offers some really nice details. The cave walls comprise a material that looks like stars when the lights are off.
That's a fun effect. How your light drags behind you, it's like all spacey until the light drags over it. I got this.
The Hearthians' equipment and junk adorn the shelves and the ground. Even though we mostly find wood in crates and barrels, we witness mined out minerals, a miner, and a couple pieces of equipment to show that this cave is at least sometimes in use.
Oh my gosh. The thrusters light up behind you. That is so freaking cool.
Further in, the Zero-G cave acts as an emulation of real zero gravity. While the model ship would have suffered as an emulation, the Zero-G cave's lack of gravity alone is enough to captivate, since some or most players may take most of the game to really master the zero gravity in space. Moreover, we learn to lock on, match velocity, and repair. All are very useful controls to tutorialize in isolation, so players are more likely to learn and remember them. Now take the zero gravity and space controls and provide a goal of repairing mining equipment to help out your fellow Hearthians, and you got yourself a meaningful tutorial experience. The most fascinating tidbit of the Zero-G cave is why the gravity is zero here. Like I mentioned previously, Outer Wilds' astrophysics is very much real. The center of planets have a zero net gravitational force, and the developers have shown how Timber Hearth's Zero-G cave is indeed at the very center of the planet. If you were to hollow out a spherically symmetric space in the center of a planet, the net gravitational force would be zero at every point inside that hollow space. This can be mathematically proven through both Newton's shell theorem and Gauss's law of gravity. The entrance to the museum alone provides one cultural significance after another and more mystery to boot. Our space program is called Outer Wilds Ventures. The museum documents the history of the first Outer Rock landing by Feldspar as the first intentional launch into space. LOL. Furthermore, Hornfels just prepped up the first fully intact Nomai statue for display, and will be the first Hearthian to use the new translator tool. Right inside the museum lies our first translation. Honestly, it's pretty exciting to be part of such a monumental day that Hearthians will totally record in their history books and not be obliterated instead. Up to this point, Hal and every other NPC's dialogue closes out before we exhaust the available information. For all intents and purposes, if an NPC automatically ends the conversation is over, unless the player has been conditioned otherwise. It's possible for a player to miss roughly 62% of noteworthy dialogue in the Timber Hearth tutorial area, and that's entirely the game's fault. From the handful of people I watched play Outer Wilds, half of them missed out on a non-trivial amount of information. The only reason I didn't miss out is because I already confronted that problem in Dark Souls. Thankfully, dialogue never auto-exits here on out without good reason. Do I want to date Hal though? Good question, thanks for asking. Hal is short for halite, commonly known as rock salt in the mineral form of sodium chloride. Excess sodium increases blood pressure and my risk of stroke, heart failure, osteoporosis, stomach cancer, and kidney disease. No thanks. Outer Wilds flaunts its confidence in its systems when it shows the moon's effect on Timber Hearth in a small container. The moon influences the balls on display, especially apparent when the balls cross from one end to the other. The moon also happens to affect us when we jump, which is just mind-boggling. The studio Mobius Digital didn't fake anything. Mobius capitalized on their real astrophysics as much as they could, and I'm glad they did. The museum further showcases the Harthians' passion and curiosity for space. Each display case portrays a certain mechanic or object found on one or more planets in our star system. The museum represents every planet without spoiling anything significant. The display cases increase our curiosity for each planet, except Dark Bramble's anglerfish. Screw that. However, Outer Wilds doesn't only encourage our curiosity for each planet in the museum. The game's introduction thus far mentions several different features and events regarding planets in our star system. NPCs mention or trigger motivation for Timberhearth 4 times, Outer Rock twice, Brittle Hollow once, and Giant's Deep thrice. And that's not including the explosion in the sky from Giant's Deep and the 3 mentions of the missing astronaut Feldspar and his harmonica. We're left with several questions and mysteries to ponder and explore, yet the amount of information in the village and museum never overwhelms the player. The information, for the most part, trickles in disguised as dialogue and personality in between humor and interactive tutorial pieces. In addition, the scope of the questions also contribute to the excellent pacing. The questions lead to both planet-specific mysteries and overarching mysteries that span across the star system. The museum's first floor hosts a great balance between planet-specific and overarching story-wide mysteries. The museum's second floor contains the observatory and a more broad, encompassing view of our star system. The observatory broadens our perspective. Quite literally. The way the map zooms and pans out from Timberhearth indulges us with an awe-striking view of our star system. The map really is the icing on the tutorial cake. Additionally, since we're introduced to the map at the end of the tutorial and not in the ship, we won't be as overwhelmed with information once we take our inaugural launch. The observatory also hosts additional context in terms of Harthian space knowledge. The walls of the observatory showcase Hornfels' findings. Hornfels notes how the lights in the image are not stars, but galaxies. Hornfels also calculates that the galaxies are moving away from them, and the farther away a galaxy is, the faster it appears to be moving away, similar to how our galaxy is expanding. Outer Wilds loves to convey Harthians' current technological progress, like Hornfels' charts and notes, and their brand new translator tool. Furthermore, our scout, signal scope, and ship are not just video game mechanics, they're tools with historical significance. For example, our little scout could not always instantaneously recall. Before they installed the warp retrieval capability, they'd lose scouts all the time. For the signal scope, its function entirely revolves around and depends on their culture's reliance on distinct instruments and music. Nice expresses bittersweetness in that the more Harthians in space, the less Harthians for their orchestra. For the ship, it ties in with much of the space program's history found throughout the village. In character with Slay and his lack of QA for past launches, they attempted but failed to add an autopilot avoidance system so we don't crash into objects like the sun between us and our autopilot target. But don't worry, the avoidance system will work at some point. Maybe. Because the game teaches you about and connects you with the technological improvements of the Harthians, the game's mechanics certainly feel more remarkable and our place in history more tangible. Finally, we reach Hornfels for the launch codes. Hornfels will forever remind us of Spooky Shrek.
Have you seen that Spooky Shrek video? Because she's doing the little hand thing that Spooky Shrek does. Hold on, I gotta tell you this.
Oh, I might have seen this one. I think I've seen this one. Why is this the first thing you thought of?
Well, look at him! It's exactly the same! He's the Spooky Shrek.
Less importantly, but still noteworthy, Hornfels asks what you are more interested in exploring first once you're in space.
He's the person who gives you the launch code, and he's also the only mandatory conversation in the entire game. And initially we're trying things like giving the player the option to ask what their mission was or where to go next, and then he would go like, yeah, it's up to you. And what we ended up with instead was we reversed it. You as a player, what do you want to do next? That ended up really working, like surprisingly well. And because, you know, it's a selection, we gave them a few ideas too, right? It's like if they didn't know what to do, we still gave like, yeah, there are some things you could be interested in.
Hornfels' dialogue forces you to actually sit down with the information the game has provided and think about what interests or motivates you. Hornfels, depending on your dialogue choice, helps the player by giving them relevant information to help them achieve their goal. Hornfels clues you in on certain planets or otherwise what you can keep your eye out for. However, the last two dialogue options contradict the game's push for the player to engage with and make meaningful decisions about the knowledge they've gathered and what interests them. Both I don't know and I'll wing it provide easy outs for the player, and players take the path of least resistance. Both options should be removed. I don't know can help those who are overwhelmed. However, the option I'll start with somewhere small is a great alternative that effectively means the same thing. Both options lead to the most natural starting point, the moon. If the player is in fact overwhelmed, just the act of selecting I'll start with somewhere small evokes a more grounded motivation in the player compared to the perpetuation of their overwhelmed feeling through I don't know. Arguably, the point of Hornfels' dialogue is to translate your potential motivation into direction. I don't know isn't a motivation, nor does it motivate the player. If you choose I'll meet up with the other travelers, Hornfels mentions a few names on different planets with a slight nudge toward Adelrock. Through this option, the player is even more likely to pull out their signal scope, follow a signal, find a Harthian astronaut, and discover additional direction from said astronaut. If you choose I want to go somewhere no one's gone before, Hornfels provides the interloper and hesitantly mentions Dark Bramble. The player may run away from Dark Bramble with their tail between their legs, but a starting point is a starting point, and Dark Bramble is certainly the most mind-boggling and mysterious of the planets. The option I'm going to learn more about the Nomai is excellent, but Hornfels doesn't respond with anything. The I'll start small option recommends using your new Nomai translator tool on Adelrock's Nomai ruins. Why doesn't this Nomai dialogue option mention Adelrock's Nomai ruins as well? Or at the very least, Brittle Hollow. Brittle Hollow contains the most Nomai history out of any other planet. After we collect the launch codes, you may have noticed the insane amounts of marshmallows near Hornfels' slate in our ship and throughout the village. Since marshmallows are the Harthians' only food source and we eat them often during our space travels, I can only surmise that Outer Wilds is not only an exploration game, but also a cannibalistic cooking game. Marshmallows primarily comprise sugar and egg whites. Your fellow Harthians refer to you as hatchling, which means Harthians hatch from eggs. Not a single other species exists on Timber Hearth, and the only other egg-laying species in the star system is both dangerous and unknown to the Harthians. Outer Wilds is really a game of strict population control. Eat your heart out, China. If we step back for a moment, it's easy to forget the significance of our launch since the character itself is launching, not the player. We're playing a game, so the game must do everything it can to establish the monumental, realistic importance of the launch. Outer Wilds excellently conveys our inaugural launch as an achievement and historic Harthian milestone. The game emphasizes the Harthian culture's passion and curiosity for space and the Harthians' current knowledge on the past and present mysteries of our star system. We're not apathetic towards our voyage, but rather we tensely anticipate it. After we collect the launch codes, we should have an idea of where we want to go. If not, the ship's ship log contains the couple leads we've gathered thus far. If all else fails, we can choose the first planet that visually catches our 4 eyes. Even though we can check out any planet at this point, I'll begin our launch into each planet with the game's 2 closest and natural starting points. Timber Hearth hosts some quite intriguing mysteries and is conveniently our home planet. A couple of these mysteries in particular stand out when we're exploring the village. Thought to be lost, the sound of feldspar and their harmonica originates from 2 planets, including Timber Hearth. Additionally, you may try to fly Micah's model ship down a geyser. What could be down there? Timber Hearth introduces its own mysteries during the tutorial through a more hands-on and self-discovery approach instead of dialogue, so Timber Hearth effectively draws our attention. As we launch to orbit Timber Hearth, there's a jarring large contrast in detail between the tutorial village and the surrounding terrain that covers most of the planet. The village feels alive, like a real place, both ecologically and geographically. Timber Hearth, on the other hand, is mostly barren and devoid of any geographical features in the space between landmarks. Outer Wilds' landmarks act as points of interest and often as entry points into areas of the planet. Mobius intentionally left the space between these landmarks empty to discourage people from scouring every corner of planets for information or objects that don't exist. On the other hand, players can't build a mental map of the planet's flat and empty terrain. No matter how many times you travel to a planet in Outer Wilds, your only points of reference are the landmarks. Therefore, throughout the game, you'll fly around planets aimlessly until you stumble across one of these landmarks. On Timber Hearth, we're only interested in the wooded areas and the geysers. Everything else is boring to look at and not very useful for navigation, mental mapping, or environmental storytelling. Actually, even some of the landmarks are surprisingly bare. Timber Hearth's stream adds a small amount of subtle believability and dimension to the space. The planet's terrain could also form creeks, ravines, hills, any number of minor natural features to help with mental mapping and to ease the transition between detailed landmarks like the village and the surrounding dull landscape. I'm not saying they should add more large, detailed areas all over the surface, but nevertheless, a more interesting and varied landscape would aid the player in pathfinding and also contribute to a more immersive experience. Brittle Hollow and Hourglass Twins are small rocks, as expected of planets, so it's easier to get over their lack of environmental details and mental mappable terrain. As a planet with greenery, Timber Hearth suffers the most from the harsh contrast between the landmarks and the space between. The village is detailed and fun and engaging to explore, so to strip that environmental engagement and exploration from players so suddenly can evoke a negative reaction from them. In the grand scheme of things, however, you get over the boring surfaces, focus on the landmarks, and whilst traversing the empty spaces between the landmarks, engage in the crazy astrophysics and low gravity of space and ponder over your newly obtained knowledge. According to the art director Wesley Martin, Mobius drew inspiration from many real-world locations, specifically national parks. For Timber Hearth, the artist took inspiration from Yellowstone and Sequoia National Parks with a touch of Mount Rainier as seen with the alpine trees. Timber Hearth's grove offers a possible first encounter with a large quantum shard. Quantum shards, which broke off from the quantum moon, and the nearby objects appear to teleport around once you break line of sight with them. The grove is arguably the best introduction to the game's quantum shards because of its tree density and atmosphere. A forest of quantum trees inside a grove will most definitely spook and startle the player as it profoundly demonstrates the quantum shard's power and influence. Thankfully, a player's unfamiliarity with both the game's take-on and real-life quantum theory only plays a small role in the impact and surprise factor of the Grove's quantum experience. Even if I was familiar with real-life quantum theory before playing the game, it's one thing to understand quantum theory and another to experience a gamified immersive version of it. Furthermore, Quantum in Outer Wilds ties closely with Know My History, The Eye of the Universe, The Quantum Moon, exploration, and puzzles. Outer Wilds plays by its own rules and explicitly states them in a way that allows the player to internalize and apply them. It's quite the journey to discover and learn the game's quantum rules and their applications regardless of your current knowledge on the matter. The Quantum Grove also contains a poem. Unfortunately, the poem doesn't hint at or lead to some kind of hidden area or puzzle. However, at least the poem serves as a second object to notice in the grove so you'll stick around longer. The poem itself is also quantum. The 4 verses mix and match for a total of 24 possible permutations. A quantum poem is a fascinating quantum interaction, and if the player notices the rearranged verses, they'll stick around for even longer to investigate and confirm their suspicions. Ideally, the player remains in the area long enough to notice the teleporting trees and objects. The longer you're in the area, the more likely you'll turn around and run headfirst into a tree, and that's certainly the goal. Mining Site 2B welcomes us with a pitch-black cave. You can fly around the waterfall in your path, or your exploration is expedited by a quick push from the waterfall that plunges you into this dark unknown. As you explore, you discover that Site 2B contains useful information on Ash Twin and a strange projection of some mask-shaped structures.
Are you alright?
I'm just confused.
Even then, the area feels a bit empty. Site 2B contains mining holes and elevator used to hoist the rocks to the top and the mined out rocks themselves. But where's the mining equipment? Did the Nomai mine the material using magic? I'm not really sure. Site 2B's darkness is the perfect place to utilize the scout as a light source, and the dark mined out holes encourage its use to get a better look inside. But the mining site doesn't incentivize or reward its use with details that we'd expect to see. Nomai supposedly mined out Ash Twin and its core somehow and built Ash Twin's new core out of Timber Hearth's rock, so Timber Hearth Site 2B would have been a great place to showcase some tasty world building. One of the best experiences in Outer Wilds is arriving shortly. If you haven't played Outer Wilds and you ignored my warning, now's your chance to skedaddle. Or mute the video and let it run in the background if you want to help out the channel. I watched other people's Outer Wilds playthroughs after my own because an open-ended exploration game like Outer Wilds offers the most opportunity for unique experiences, reactions, and thought processes. Every one of these playthroughs inevitably confronts the red giant in the room.
Oh, there's the sun. The sun looks very large.
None of them, however, thought anything of the odd change in music once the song End Times began playing. All of them were stunned by the result. I certainly understand why they didn't react to the change in music. End Times is a melodic track in a game with melodic tracks, and these players were already exposed to prominent melodic tracks from the village. The game also likes to change its music based on the area or type of area you're in, so even if we notice a change in music, it's most likely either expected or disregarded. Even if they found the shift to End Times odd, and in all probability they did for at least a brief moment, what can they attribute the music to? Nothing. They can guess it's related to the area they're in. They're not very likely to attribute End Times to the Red Giant, since this early on nobody knows about the time loop. End Times is the time loop's final countdown for most of the game, so it becomes a constant and expected result. But for at least the first time loop, End Times cues in a truly magical and memorable moment. Can we please have a moment of silence for those lost during the supernova catastrophe? Thank you. Timber Hearth perfectly paces out its tutorials and initial mysteries, and the first moment you spend playing the game is no exception. Outer Wilds begins without a cutscene or expository, yet without moving our camera, we're already fixated on and fascinated by our very first mystery. The explosion in the sky accomplishes more in less time than a cutscene would, all while remaining part of— Just kidding, time didn't actually rewind, silly. The first supernova has a special place in my heart as one of the best surprises and moments I've experienced in a video game. In the age of the internet, we often underestimate how spoilers and spectating affect our video game experiences. Memorable moments are no longer memorable, and that's one of the worst possible outcomes when engaging with any type of media. We experience our very first time loop, yet strangely we retain our memories, for the sake of the story, but also to avoid a dissonance between the character and the player. We may also notice at some point that we're already standing out of our sleeping bag when we wake up. An animation to transition from sleeping in the bag to standing up wouldn't be worth the investment and would only take away from the orbital probe cannon focal point in the sky. Additionally, the less animation, the sooner the player can launch back into space at the beginning of each time loop. Anyway, back to Timber Hearth. Mining Site 2A further emphasizes Timber Hearth's proclivity for the dark unknown. The underground water cave system is a straightforward path with information on Hearthian origins in one of the rooms. Our initial curiosity and potential fear of the unknown is strong in this cave system, but unfortunately the curiosity only lasts a handful of seconds as the exploration is sorely terse. Timber Hearth's areas are super brief, sometimes to my disappointment. Even though we discover fantastic revelations in Know My Scrolls like any other planet, Timber Hearth feels like a teaser. The Hearthian village excellently hooks players in, but Timber Hearth not so much. Timber Hearth's exploration, curiosity, and potential fear of the unknown are on such a small scale that the planet serves as the sampler of our star system and future ventures. Timber Hearth's brief sampling of dark, exploratory mysteries wouldn't be as much of an issue if the game's pacing demanded it. Outer Wilds leaves the entire star system in the palm of the player's hands. The player could visit Timber Hearth last and thus find it very underwhelming compared to previous planets. On the other hand, the village can be a teaser or sampler because it's paced as the game's first area. Since the player chooses which planet to navigate to and when, it's difficult to justify Timber Hearth's overall deficient and underwhelming Mining Site 2B, Quantum Grove, and the cave system hidden underneath the geysers. Both the smoke and the harmonica sound when equipped with the signal scope draw us to the Dark Bramble Seed Crater. Although Dark Bramble only contains 3 landmarks inside, very strong Dark Bramble mysteries develop from information found on Timber Hearth and Outer Rock alone. We hear Feldspar's harmonica coming from both Timber Hearth and Dark Bramble. We fall into a huge crater on Outer Rock left by ice pieces of what Dark Bramble used to be, and the seed on Timber Hearth put roots down in a hurry. These mysteries compound quickly and cultivate our curiosity. Our interest must be strong enough to overcome our potential fear of the unknown, and oh boy, Dark Bramble is one tense hellhole as deceptively large as Randy Pitchford's ego. Only a select few discoveries in the game open up new dialogue options with NPCs. When we shoot our little scout inside the Bramble Seed, Tektite comments on our findings. It feels good to share our crazy new discovery with someone. Tektite's scout launcher hint, on the other hand, can unintentionally lead players astray. Tektite says, "Tuff can help me haul the old scout launcher over here." To my surprise, I watched one player walk back to Tuff in the Zero-G cave only to be confused by the inability to ask Tuff about hauling the scout launcher to the Bramble Seed. The player in question had no idea a scout launcher was part of the suit, and I can't blame him because he's not the only one who decided not to strap on their suit when they checked out the Bramble Seed with Tektite. Early on, players test the extent to which NPCs react to new information. More than once I've seen players wanting to share information they found with a nearby NPC, but the NPC doesn't afford a new dialogue option. Thankfully, the player's disappointment only lasts a few moments, typically somewhere on either Timber Hearth or Addlerock. The disappointment wanes quickly because, as we learn the hard way, only you retain the information you discover in any given loop and no one else. You're ultimately alone in your journey, so you make peace with it. Addlerock is the most natural or instinctive first travel destination because of its proximity to our home planet. In the Hearthian village, Hornfels, Hal, and Marl may mention Addlerock and the lonely Esker located there, so our draw to Addlerock isn't just natural from its proximity and orbit, but from our sympathy for Esker. Esker, simply put, is loneliness personified. They're a lunar local in a place no longer frequented by the space program. For a relatively laid-back species, Hearthians excellently represent a variety of perspectives and situations that adds character to entities which would otherwise be information buckets.
Now I feel bad leaving him.
Adderrock introduces us to a system that supports the previously discussed landmark system. Both Esker and our UI's map on the left side of the screen encourages us to always check the north and south poles of planets. The north and south poles always contain a landmark. The poles help alleviate the potential problem of too many places to explore in my exploration game. The poles serve both as reliable starting points and as places to check to ensure we've explored every location. We don't find the North and South Pole information in the village because we can't travel to Timberhearth's poles right away. When a game establishes a feature and the player can't immediately act on it, 90% of players forget what was just taught. Therefore, the pole feature introduction is much more appropriate and effective in an environment that allows near-instant player reaction and prompt feedback. Adderrock is the perfect place for this information because Adderrock's small size and low gravity results in a very low travel time from any given point to either pole. Did someone say low gravity? Oh, why yes I did, and the jump takes perfect advantage of it. We hold the jump button to crouch, then let go for the actual jump. Each jump is more meaningful than in most other games because of the jump's lengthy anticipation, reduced jump frequency, and the dynamic jump duration from the change in gravity. A surprising amount of the game's fun comes from low gravity jumps and the resulting satisfying thump from smacking into an object.
Bonk.
Never gets old.
It really doesn't.
If you remember from the museum, a Know My Scroll mentions a device on Adderrock. We stumble across the device at Adderrock's South Pole. This eye signal locator demonstrates one of Outer Wilds' strengths. We can play with the same physical devices the Nomai built and used. Even more, we mess with the device before reading about it so Nomai don't rob us of our own initial discoveries, experiments, and observations. Underneath the device, Nomai scrolls provide confirmation on which celestial bodies the device was tested on. Ultimately, we're allowed to come to the same conclusions as the Nomai, which creates a more interactive and engaging experience. Our next stop, Brittle Hollow. For Brittle Hollow, Mobius drew inspiration from Greenland and Iceland, mainly for the basalt rocks. As we fly toward Brittle Hollow, I don't want to understate the importance of the absence of cutscenes. A lesser game would fly the camera around like it's Mary Poppins in a tornado to survey and highlight the planet's main features or possible points of interest. Cutscenes in many different types of games hold the player's hand to ensure they see a specific thing at the cost of player discovery, control, exploration, and the element of surprise. A single cutscene can ruin a non-trivial portion of an experience. I absolutely adore the anticipation and surprise of each and every new unexplored planet. Spoilers included in cutscenes would take away much of my enjoyment of Outer Wilds. Mobius invested an unbelievable amount of time behind the scenes to ensure Brittle Hollow achieves a perfect balance of predictability and chaos. Brittle Hollow's moon, Hollow's lantern, bombards Brittle Hollow's surface with flaming meteors. I'd expect each meteor and piece of planet to fall predictably at their respective times each time loop because each time loop should play out exactly the same, outside of player influence. Surprisingly, Brittle Hollow and Hollow's Lantern's procedural physics simulation system is not deterministic. In other words, Brittle Hollow collapses differently every time loop without player intervention. Behind the scenes, Hollow's Lantern launches its fiery meteors at semi-random intervals. Mobius created a heat map on Brittle Hollow for the meteor hit locations and tweaked each piece of crust's health values. When a lava rock hits a surface, the rock deals a semi-random amount of structural damage to that segment's integrity. Mobius essentially fought against physics and gravity to create Brittle Hollow's underlying systems to influence the meteors. Mobius calls Brittle Hollow their final boss for a reason. The planet was a complex challenge.
The hardest planet we often referred to as the final boss for the art team was Brittle Hollow, because it's the biggest planet because it has both an outside and an inside surface. It's one of the biggest planets just in terms of diameter, and then it's one of the most complex in terms of level design and pathing and all these different things that need to go there, like 2 giant Nomai cities. It was like the hardest for every discipline of the game, design, tech, art, like for everyone it was the final boss.
Even though I'd expect 100% predictable consistency from Outer Wilds' time loops outside of player influence, Brittle Hollow's unpredictable destruction feels natural within the planet's hostile and chaotic system. We'd become desensitized to Brittle Hollow quicker if we noticed the same meteors predictably crash into the same spots that cause the same fragments to fall. Predictability for the meteors and unimportant pieces of crust could compromise the crucial element of surprise. The meteors constantly surprised me whenever I was on the surface, so they stuck with me as a memorable experience.
Ah. What's that? It ran into the side of the dome.
However, if left unchecked, the meteors' random damage and hit locations could send every important story or puzzle-related crust fragment down into oblivion 5 minutes into a time loop. If the important pieces all fall early on, these pieces become difficult to discover and navigate, and thus results in confusion and frustration, particularly for players unfamiliar with the planet. Therefore, Mobius had to rein in the semi-random system. For example, the Nomai town ruins can't fall into the black hole until the surrounding fragments do. The Tower of Quantum Knowledge will always appear through the white hole toward the end of a time loop. In other words, the destruction patterns for the main points of interest are predictable. Overall, Brittle Hollow achieves a perfect balance of predictability. The main pieces of Brittle Hollow fall at their respective times each time loop as expected. On the other hand, we can't predict the meteors and most other crust pieces, so the planet retains the surprise factor for time loop replayability without a noticeable decrease in consistency. Brittle Hollow's frailty introduces a couple more design considerations. Firstly, should paths double up in case one of them collapses into the black hole so the planet is still navigable? On one hand, we want alternative routes since the loss of particular paths can make the planet unnavigable and cut off certain areas for Brittle Hollow newbies. Alternative routes can also ensure that every landmark branches into multiple choices for the player. On the other hand, alternative routes can overcomplicate the level design and thus confuse players and hinder their mental mapping process. To help mitigate potential player navigational and mapping frustrations, Brittle Hollow contains alternative routes but often distinguishes them from one another. Sure, you can cross the bridge over to the Hanging City, or you can take the upside down gravity crystal trail, or even the shortcut from the North Pole. Options. We got them.
No, frick. Are you kidding me? Oh.
Once we've mentally mapped Brittle Hollow, we can use the planet's low gravity to traverse recognizable terrain with ease regardless of which paths remain. Therefore, the player's reduced reliance on alternative routes acts as a mastery bonus. Some of the level design incorporates small gaps as well, so the game at least eases players into low gravity leaps across gaps. Moreover, towards the end of a time loop, Brittle Hollow's mostly collapsed self further encourages or even forces players to leap across gaps. As a bonus, the player now faces a higher chance of falling into the black hole. Brittle Hollow's frailty introduces another design consideration: clipping. Underneath the surface lies the majority of the exploration, so what would happen if a piece of the planet falls and clips through other pieces? The two pieces crushed the player without any warning. Mobius tediously changed and tweaked each fragment's shape and center of gravity until the pieces fell with minimal clipping. And it certainly paid off. Our little scout can measure Brittle Hollow's structural integrity. Despite Rebeck and Feldspar's mention of the Scout's integrity reader, not a single person from the playthroughs I've seen, mine included, thought to use the Scout's integrity reader on Brittle Hollow. I didn't even realize the Scout's integrity indicator could change until I saw it change during my buddy's playthrough. Why do some people not think to use the Scout's integrity reader? On the North Pole, Feldspar mentions the Scout's integrity reader with a non-trivial amount of flavor text and in between the main focus of his notes, the extra fuel he left behind. If we decide to use the Scout's integrity reader, we measure 100% integrity on the land we're standing on, as expected from Feldspar's notes. We'll most likely never measure integrity again because our initial experience resulted in useless information. The Scout's integrity reads 100% on every other planet, so it's easy for us to toss the integrity feature aside and forget about it. Additionally, we most likely don't think of structural integrity as a mechanic yet. We're likely to land at Brittle Hollow's North Pole as one of our first stops because Attlerock encourages us to check out the North and South Poles of planets, and the North Pole attracts our attention by its visually distinct locale. By the time we reach the North Pole, there's a chance we're unaware of or unfamiliar with the planet's brittle crust, so Feldspar's brief mention of integrity is less likely to stand out as noteworthy or mechanically relevant. Furthermore, outside of the North Pole, it's not clear whatsoever that the meteors meaningfully interact with the planet. So why would we think about structural integrity? The meteors emit a very loud sound when they hit the surface, but they don't leave behind permanent physical damage or anything visual that suggests change. Even when a fragment loosens and collapses into the black hole, the fragment doesn't emit a tremor sound or draw attention to itself, unless you're underneath the surface and a piece falls in front of your face. Once we learn that the planet is in fact collapsing, it still takes a long while for us to link the meteors to the brittle crust and to infer that the crust's health or integrity decreases over time. Even if players eventually discover the planet's structural integrity and the Scout's integrity reader, Brittle Hollow doesn't provide much of a reason to use it. We don't need to check a fragment's integrity before stepping on it because most likely we're already halfway onto the next fragment before the piece we're standing on falls. The low gravity also eases travel, so the falling pieces pose even less of a threat. The final nail in the coffin, once we discover that the black hole is not fatal, we don't harbor any fear of falling, and some players won't fear the black hole at all because of the forgiving time loop system. We really don't have a reason to use the Scout's integrity reader. Like, at all. At all. Further into the planet, Rebeck actually spells out twice how he used his Scout to gauge the stability of the ground, but he's so loaded with dialogue that we quickly forget the information. People retain 90% of what they can immediately employ or use, and people only retain 10% of what they read. Since we can't immediately apply our newfound Scout integrity reader, there's a 90% chance the information falls into the black hole, never to be seen again. Outer Wilds' NPCs offer brief moments of respite from the loneliness of both space and the time loop only we reside in. They also offer their own personalities and experiences. Rebeck in particular is afraid of space. While I would love to comfort, encourage, or help Rebeck, Outer Wilds focuses on our major translations or discoveries, and so we can at least share a few major findings with our Hearthian buddies. Our fellow Hearthians will never understand our time travel dilemma or remember what we tell them, except Gabbro, but sharing our newfound knowledge at least provides us some temporary comfort and companionship at the end of the universe. Would I date it though? Rebeck is named after the mineral Rebeckite, which is named after the German explorer Emil Rebeck. Emil's father is Karl Adolf Rebeck, and Emil traveled with Adolf Bastian. He seems to know a lot of Adolfs. You hear that? Wait, you hear that? Oh my goodness, what a cool Easter egg! Wow. That's a really cool Easter egg. I like that. You guys should check that out yourself. It's quite the Easter egg, but it's very difficult to hear. Like, it's very quiet. I had to boost up the volume like 50 levels. Nomai constructed everything beneath Brittle Hollow's surface, which includes their place of residence, the Haining City. As expected from one of their only 2 cities in the star system, the Haining City comprises several floors with plentiful information hidden in varying degrees of difficulty to access. However, the Haining City's environmental storytelling and lifestyle details are kept at a minimum. We learn that Nomai usually follow a nomadic lifestyle, so to adjust to their new settled lifestyle and keep themselves sane, they kept their focus on the Eye of the Universe. Most appropriately, they built an Eye of the Universe shrine in their city. For the most part, however, the city lacks details on how Nomai used to live here or their accomplishments or creations outside of the usual crazy story-related scientific breakthroughs or devices. The homes are mostly indistinct and the architecture virtually remains the same throughout the game. Overall, Outer Wilds employs very little environmental storytelling for Nomai. Mobius probably kept the environmental storytelling and architecture simple and flat due to time constraints, but also to guide the player's attention to the important Nomai scrolls with minimal distractions. Nomai scrolls communicate most of the Nomai storytelling. Despite the fantastic dialogue in Nomai scrolls, it's difficult for us to distinguish characters from one another. I can't say my limited exposure to the Nomai characters has made me care about more than just a few of them. If we deeply cared for individual Nomai, maybe we would be even more emotionally invested in their experiments, discoveries, and untimely demise. However, Outer Wilds already contains an incredible amount of information. Additional information such as side stories involving prevalent personalities may bog down the experience, or at the very least wouldn't necessarily be worth the development cost. Understandably, Outer Wilds lies somewhere in the middle. Nomai personalities are recognizable. They're present, but subtle. Since I don't particularly care for individual Nomai, I can easily focus on the important information, but regardless, the present personalities add flavor, encourage player engagement with welcome banter and jokes, and hold player interest on the different story threads, information, and the species in general. Outer Wilds ideally awards information to players for their exploration or puzzle solving. However, if Outer Wilds places information poorly, the game may provide solutions to problems and mysteries the player wasn't aware of or didn't have a chance to think about. Information placement is very difficult to handle properly in Outer Wilds because of the insanely high exploration freedom. Therefore, Outer Wilds compensates for the high exploration freedom by carefully hiding high-value information behind higher difficulty puzzles or hidden locations, each one with less clues available than the average piece of information. Brittle Hollow contains 3 multi-layered puzzles or hidden locations: Tower of Quantum Knowledge, Black Hole Forge, and Southern Observatory. We can only enter Brittle Hollow's Tower of Quantum Knowledge once it collapses into the black hole and spits out through the white hole. If Brittle Hollow provided precise information on how to enter the Tower of Quantum Knowledge, then the solution would consist entirely of the boring, time-sensitive execution. Instead, we discover how to enter the tower through experimentation and testing our hypotheses on the different systems and mechanics at play. Brittle Hollow doesn't contain hidden Nomai dialogue that the player can stumble upon to ruin the puzzle. The solution arises naturally as you explore and understand how Brittle Hollow works. The Black Hole Forge encourages an understanding of Brittle Hollow as well, specifically the warp system and how the system extends to the warp towers on Ash Twin. Thankfully, we're very unlikely to accidentally stumble upon the entrance to the Black Hole Forge, since the Forge demands us to pull a switch on Brittle Hollow, then use the correct warp tower all the way on Ash Twin in a single 22-minute time loop. However, the travel to the Black Hole Forge can be tedious if the player finds the Black Hole Forge before pulling the switch, but knows exactly where the switch is. The switch exists to prevent the player from discovering an important location without first understanding the importance and context of the location. The player should want to find the important location so they feel satisfied after they explore and snap all of the pieces together. The positives of the switch's existence certainly outweigh the negatives. Brittle Hollow's Southern Observatory, a huge dome, sits prominently on the South Pole. It's a very noticeable mystery, so it'll burn in the player's mind for quite some time. Both paths to the observatory demand more difficult platforming and jetpack use than any other Brittle Hollow path. Therefore, the Southern Observatory generally rewards players who mentally map the planet's underbelly and become comfortable with navigation. The Southern Observatory is justifiably the most difficult place to find on Brittle Hollow since it contains the second eye signal locator and the solution for Giant's Deep's main puzzle. Outer Wilds must handle hints with care to avoid robbing the player of exploration and spoiling Giant's Deep. Thankfully, the only hint lies on Giant's Deep and basically says, go to the Southern Observatory.
That's actually really cool visual interpretation of quantum mechanics. I kind of want to be here when the sun explodes. Because I'm curious, but I don't want to wait that long.
Curious to what?
See if it changes.
Oh.
Because that would be a really cool detail.
I love how we get to see them discover or go through different processes of finding the eye in real time.
Yeah. It looks like the hourglass is... Ah! It's almost up.
I think the whole, like in the ship log, the whole quantum storyline thing is one of the most interesting parts of this game.
Yeah.
It's just, the whole journey is so satisfying.
I really like the movement system.
Oh,
Like
it's really good, yeah.
They really nailed the zero-G thing, and they really nailed the ship flying. Like, I've played simulators and all sorts of space games that don't even compare to how fun it is to fly around in this.
Awesome.
Because it's loose enough to be silly, but also fun.
Right.
Yeah, there's pretty much only one thing that I would change about this, and that's give your ship a little world model thing. A little map.
Like the one from the landing
Yeah,
view?
but all the time. Or
Right.
even like down below the dash or whatever.
Right. I mean, there's space on the right side of the dashboard. They could have just put, like, a little... the same map that's on your screen right now.
Yeah. I love it.
See, this gives you time to contemplate, you know,
Talk about the game.
about the universe, the meaning of life. How cool if our star system was like this.
It would suck.
It would suck so bad.
I mean, even not just like the time loop part. Like, just general.
If the entire planet was stuck in a time loop.
I just mean like the whole our
Universe
planet
dying.
is dinky.
The what?
The planet is so small
Oh yeah.
and it's really easy to get from one side to the other, and if you jump hard enough you'll end up on the moon.
How cool would that be if our community was that interconnected, dude?
Would it? It's not gonna happen.
What?
The ball's not gonna change.
Yeah, it might not. I don't think it will. But it was worth it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the hourglass might have changed. No.
Well, I guess not.
Well.
Does the music stop once they die?
No! No, it doesn't.
The most prominent and scariest part of Brittle Hollow is the black hole. The concept of a black hole is derived from Einstein's theory of relativity all the way back from 1915. The theory of general relativity predicts that a sufficiently compact mass can deform space-time to form a black hole. Despite much evidence collection since then, we only recently confirmed the black hole theory with our first black hole image constructed on April 10, 2019. Einstein was a century ahead of his time. What the heck? That's kinda crazy, don't you think? People bring their knowledge with them when they play games. The common person knows that black holes exhibit such a strong gravitational attraction that nothing can escape from them. As of this video, we know the center of a black hole, called the singularity, is a place with infinite density and gravity where space-time curves infinitely and the theory of general relativity breaks down. According to general relativity, if you fall into a black hole, you'll be torn apart via a process called spaghettification. What transpires in a black hole is still quite a mystery, but the populace generally agrees that they're quite deadly. Therefore, you may not realize Brittle Hollow's black hole doesn't equate to death until you fall into it. A player's potential fear of the unknown and inevitable death could trump their curiosity and desire to investigate. Outer Wilds must overcome this potential hurdle because otherwise the White Hole Station and Tower of Quantum Knowledge would be unreasonably difficult to discover. The solution? Literally tell the player to jump into the black hole. The not boring solution? Create opportunities for happy accidents. The more you mentally map the planet's underbelly, the more comfortable you are using the dangerous gravity lifts and abusing the low gravity to fly from one end to the other. Additionally, the silent but deadly pieces of the collapsing planet could take you with them if you're caught off guard, which is entirely possible since the planet is strangely silent when it's collapsing all around us. The Nomai's wooden platforms are also rather unstable. The Nomai never built a safety net, so overall there's a high probability that you accidentally fall into the black hole at one point or another.
Let's see what's going on. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, well, I think I'm dead. I think I'm dead. Oh, no, can I get over there? Can I get over there? Come on, come on.
In Outer Wilds, black holes don't kill you, but rather act as a variation of a type of wormhole called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. According to the hypothetical Einstein-Rosen bridge, past the black hole's event horizon lies a white hole in a parallel universe much like our own, except mirrored upside down and where time runs backwards. Unfortunately, the theory also states it would take an infinite amount of time to cross over to the opposite universe, and also the bridge closes off in the middle. So much for a bridge, am I right? Furthermore, white holes and wormholes are mathematical hypotheticals and nothing more. Thankfully, video games can take some liberties with reality. Outer Wilds strips the hypothetical down to its bare-bone building blocks, then builds something mechanically simple and practical for the developers: instant warping or teleportation. Moreover, Mobius added a layer of technology and mystery to increase player engagement. Next to the white hole lies the White Hole Station. The White Hole Station presents black and white holes as Nomai warp devices. Black and white holes also harbor a great mystery introduced on Brittle Hollow and later on Ember Twin. Objects exit white holes before they enter black holes. One tweaked warping attribute, time, spawned a grand mystery that holds our interest on black and white holes for most of the game. As I float here, the planets still look like themselves from a distance even though they're running in low level of detail, or LOD. Games decrease the complexity of their 3D models at a distance to increase performance. To complicate the LOD process, Mobius cannot unload the planet's important systems or collision data because Outer Wilds' star system is one big physics simulation. Therefore, impressively, even the game's systems run in low-level detail versions when we're away from them. As Outer Wilds creative director Alex Beecham explains, one of the core pillars of the game was having a world that feels like things are happening even when you are not there. Most games automate the LOD process, but Mobius could not. Mobius had to handcraft the low-detail versions to look as close to the actual planet as possible, because otherwise the planets would jarringly pop in if you slam into them at high speeds or if you fire your probe at them. Our next stop, Giant's Deep. Giant's Deep is the planet least based on a national park and is loosely inspired by the Santa Cruz beach cliffs where the art director grew up. If you ask me though, Giant's Deep is inspired by the ocean. I'm sorry. Giant's Deep is my favorite initial encounter out of any other planet. The planet's thick atmospheric gas completely obscures what's within. As we finally decide to take the plunge, we're immediately greeted by massive swirling vortexes and a rapidly approaching ocean. Of course, the ocean itself also obfuscates whatever mysteries lie beneath. Giant's Deep's overall atmosphere is immersive and oppressive, although I would have loved to see the apparent storm clouds more prevalent. We occasionally see flashes of what looks to be lightning in the gas, but it's hardly noticeable, and I wouldn't notice if the flashes were never included in the game. Lightning that stretches from the water to the gas would complement the tornadic waterspouts and stormy-like weather extremely well. Amongst the many mentions of different planets in the tutorial village, Outer Wilds adamantly pushes us towards Giant's Deep as our first planet. We witness an unknown marvel in the sky during our waking moments of both the game and each time loop. If the player doesn't travel to Giant's Deep first, they certainly feel more compelled to after each death's fresh dose of sky explosion. We're also left with a very potent mystery right before we board our ship. A Nomai statue opens its eyes and our memories flash before our own. Hal then recommends Giant's Deep as a source of answers. If the player is willing to ignore Timber Hearth and Adelrock for the time being, Giant's Deep is the obvious first destination for 3 reasons. 1. The game presents the strong Nomai statue mystery right before our departure. 2. Hal reinforces the Nomai statue mystery right before our departure. And 3. The game marks the mystery in the ship log for our departure. Therefore, from our initial introduction and exploration of our village, Outer Wilds strongly encourages travel to Giant's Deep and points us toward an easily accessible significant revelation. And that's a mistake. The game just introduced a crazy Nomai statue mystery that should plague us for numerous time loops, yet we're led straight to the spot where the mystery resolves. The statue workshop reveals how the Nomai statues link with someone, send their memories to their respective storage unit inside the Ash Twin project, then the unit sends the memories back to the linked person or object, as also part of the Ash Twin project. Major revelations impact us a great deal more if the mysteries have enough time to bake inside of us as we adjust to our environment enough to fully grasp and understand the revelation. Revelations are more difficult to process and appreciate without the proper context, build-up, and grasp of the revelation's significance. The Statue Workshop's revelation resolves a significant mystery that ties in with the most important location in Outer Wilds, the Ash Twin Project. Outer Wilds usually carefully hides revelations that motivate players toward the Ash Twin Project, and rightfully so. If the player somehow finds their way into the Ash Twin core early on, the core spoils most of the game's plot with text lined up in sequence. Outer Wilds should, and usually does, gradually increase player interest in the Ash Twin Project throughout the game, and thus hide major revelations and motivations in tougher to reach spots. Either the statue workshop shouldn't be as accessible as it is, Hal shouldn't mention it, or both. We can access the statue workshop 2 different ways, either from space or from the ocean.
Take me away. To hide under these roots. The roots aren't helping. Just like turn on. Oh! Cool.
Oh no, I don't know if you should enter from the top.
Oh.
Oh! Woo!
Oh, hey. There's a doodad. Oh, hey, there's the blue lightnings. There we go. This is what I was trying to do.
Sure.
No, it was. It's just I was gonna do it in space.
The space method requires more thought and provokes a more tension-filled scenario as you're left to navigate in a very precarious situation. The ocean method, on the other hand, acts as a much easier access point and thus it's not nearly as rewarding by comparison. In case the player finds their way through the easy ocean access point, inside the statue workshop itself lies an elevated platform that requires space's 0G to access. So either way, we must use space to our advantage at one point or another. Out of any landmark on Giant's Deep, we're most likely to visit the orbital probe cannon first. Every time loop we wake up to witness this hunk of material explode and fire some object in a random direction. The probe and cannon are the only landmarks to catch our eye since everything else hides behind the giant's curtain of gas. Since the orbital probe cannon is part of the Nomai's third and final eye signal locator, Brittle Hollow's Southern Observatory's second eye signal locator also leads us here.
Oh. Oh, no. Okay, there we go. Ah! I bet the Nimoy or whatever they're called never did that before.
When we visit the orbital probe cannon, we don't walk right into some insane revelation, but rather the first piece of a large puzzle, the lost probe tracking module of the orbital probe cannon. Thus begins our exploration across Giant's Deep surface to discover more clues to the puzzle and, eventually, unearth the module at the very core of the planet. The probe tracking module puzzle is brilliant because we can solve the puzzle on our own terms. When we think of a potential solution, we can immediately enact it and observe the consequences. Giant's Deep encourages us to experiment and figure out how the planet works and what secrets it may be hiding. As we explore the star system, the higher the value of information, the more effort should be expected from the player. Giant's Deep initially feeds information to us extremely well. You're visually introduced to the waterspouts, a waterspout knocks you up into space while you're on an island, a projection stone tells you that a piece of equipment fell into the ocean, which may or may not relate to the waterspouts. The game gradually feeds information to us, which in turn gradually increases and or redirects our curiosity and inches our way to a resolution. That is, until Giant's Deep hands us the resolution without much player effort. The construction yard's Nomai projection stone intends to show where we can find the final hint, but instead its projection pool shows the solution. The key to the probe tracking module inside of Giant's Deep's core lies in how the waterspouts spin either clockwise or counterclockwise. With that information, we potentially don't even need to leave Giant's Deep. Ideally, the construction yard's projection stone either shouldn't be as easily accessible so it takes player effort to find, or shouldn't show us the observatory so we must travel to Brittle Hollow's Southern Observatory if we need the final hint. I like how the projection stone shows something useful since most projection stones don't, but in its current location it reveals too much for too little effort. Perhaps the statue workshop could house the projection stone instead of the Nomai statue information. Additionally, as we explore Brittle Hollow in search of the observatory, we learn more about Nomai history and the Nomai's obsession with the Eye of the Universe to better prepare us and our anticipation for the jaw-dropping discovery of the Eye of the Universe coordinates found in Giant's Deep's core. Inside the southern observatory lies the Nomai's tornado simulation. The majority of the discoveries in Outer Wilds offer a visual representation and then a textual representation of the same information. While it's effective and engaging for players to learn information through gameplay, the Nomai scrolls both reinforce the information and assist players who innately learn information easier through text. However, Outer Wilds should allow the player to experiment with the tornado simulation and attain the revelation themselves before the text confirmation. The average player would feel much more satisfied and fulfilled. Ideally, the Nomai scroll next to the simulation doesn't detail the solution, but rather encourages the player to jump into the two tornadoes to see what happens. On the small chance the player does not understand the takeaway, then the ship log holds the information anyway, or the game could hide the text somewhere in the observatory away from the simulation to encourage players to experiment first, similar to how Outer Rock's eye signal locator handled it. Thankfully, the tracking module hides behind more than one puzzle layer. The first comprises the counterclockwise tornadic waterspout, the second comprises a captivating electrical barrier and jellyfish who seem impervious to the barrier. If the player can't figure the second puzzle out, the hint lies on Dark Bramble this time around. In fact, the jellyfish hint on Dark Bramble works extremely well. Feldspar doesn't outright tell you to climb inside the Giant's Deep jellyfish, but rather points you toward the hint. The jellyfish hint doesn't outright tell you to enter them for safe passage, but rather motivates you to climb inside a dead one. Outer Wilds provides the information and tools for the player to attain the revelation themselves. Overall, the tracking module puzzle's second layer and the planet's general crazy aesthetics and waterspouts saves the puzzle from the first layer's otherwise anticlimactic fate. Since the whole planet lays wide open with no gates outside of knowledge, it's entirely possible, if extraordinarily improbable, for someone to accidentally fly into the one counterclockwise waterspout. The puzzle isn't entirely ruined, however, since the intended gradual puzzle solving is essentially traded for the strong element of surprise. Additionally, maybe you can't figure out the second puzzle and so you leave to return later. On the return trip back to the jellyfish puzzle, you now must solve the mystery of which waterspout pushed you deep below the current the first time. I can no longer ignore the giant tornadic waterspout in the room. Gabbro is totally dating material. It's the only Hearthian stuck in this time loop with me, so we have a deep connection already. Gabbro makes me particularly wet. Oh wait, that's just the planet. Haha, just kidding, I bet Gabbro's wet from all that Giant's Deep water splashing on him all the time. Gabbro forms from the slow cooling of magnesium-rich and iron-rich magma into a hollow crystalline mass deep below the surface. Therefore, Gabbro takes a long while to cool down from heated arguments, and I'm afraid he'd build walls between us as he's cooling down beneath the Earth's surface. I'm not sure my little heart could bear the distance. Oh, right, the other giant tornadic waterspout in the room. It's about time we talk about the Tower of Quantum Trials, quantum mechanics, and the quantum moon. Surprisingly, the strange quantum phenomena found and explained throughout Outer Wilds isn't too far from the truth. Subatomic particles, or quanta, exist as possibilities and probabilities. The famous double-slit experiment perfectly demonstrates quantum mechanics. First, we emit wave functions from a single source, such as water or light, through two slits. The resulting two waves interfere with one another, which causes a particular pattern against the wall called an interference pattern. Whenever we see this pattern, we know two waves are interfering with one another. Second, we shoot electrons toward the two slits. Of course, we'd expect two columns of electrons against the wall, one on the other side of each slit. It's like shooting BBs through the slits. The result should be obvious. Except it isn't. The electrons end up forming the same wave interference pattern against the wall. The conclusion? Subatomic particles exist as waves until we observe them. You can check the description for a full, easy-to-digest explanation of the double-slit experiment that also includes other observations. Outer Wilds' quantum shards are not subatomic particles and not completely accurate, but they're an excellent gamified version. Just like subatomic particles, quantum shards exist as waves until we observe them. For as long as quantum shards exist as waves, they essentially exist in a possibility state, and we can measure the probabilities of where they exist based on the wave. It's not until we measure or observe the quantum shard that it collapses into an observable existence from its probable possibilities. Many different phenomena constitute quantum mechanics, one of which is quantum tunneling. Pretend you throw a ball at a wall, and that ball sometimes decides to phase through the wall to the other side. Quantum tunneling, ladies and gentlemen. Quantum shards embody quantum tunneling by simply not caring about obstacles like walls between points of possibility. The most exaggerated example is Ember Twin's quantum shard. It quantum tunnels through the inside of the planet to appear in any of its possible locations. Outer Wilds' quantum objects also embody quantum entanglement, but that's too much for this video. Quantum mechanics also includes Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which involves the same wave functions previously discussed. I suggest you research on your own because the quantum field is entirely fascinating. Outer Wilds' quantum phenomena ultimately leads us to the eye of the universe and its moon, the quantum moon.
Gosh,
I love how the sound stopped mid-open.
Yeah. I just wanted to look around. Is that so much to ask?
The quantum moon is the penultimate mystery. It's the second toughest to solve, but also the second most rewarding, right behind the eye of the universe. The entire quantum journey to the quantum moon is probably my favorite adventure of Outer Wilds, although that's not entirely fair, as its mysteries constitute a chunk of the game in its own right. Unfortunately, the quantum moon is only optional. While I would love to guarantee that every player experiences the quantum journey, ultimately the optionality of the quantum moon doesn't matter because the quantum moon has the confidence in its ability to entice players into its quantum journey. Mobius scattered quantum shards and quantum rules across the entire star system. The quantum moon itself can orbit every planet, and Nomai built more than one quantum moon locator and wrote extensively about the moon. Outer Wilds heavily encourages players to engage with the quantum and quantum moon mysteries to great effect. 3 puzzle pieces constitute the quantum moon: Giant Deep's Tower of Quantum Trials, Brittle Hollow's Tower of Quantum Knowledge, and Ember Twin's Quantum Entanglement Shard. All 3 reward players with quantum rules for either their understanding of the game's mechanics or their curiosity, or both. Giant Deep's Tower of Quantum Trials in particular is structured as traditional puzzle chambers of progressing difficulty. Once you complete level 1, you jump down to the next chamber, and so on. By the end, you've gained a firm grasp of the tower's quantum rule or lesson. The tower's puzzle chamber layout could feel railroaded in an otherwise freedom-driven game, but it actually works very well for 3 reasons. Variety can keep players engaged, narratively the chambers were built as part of the Nomai's own quantum training grounds, and the puzzle chamber setup is certainly a tried and true way to ensure players genuinely learn a particular lesson. It's also very fitting for a thick gas and gargantuan tornadic waterspout horror to unveil a monumental tower of secrets. The Tower of Quantum Trials is by no means difficult to find, especially compared to the Tower of Quantum Knowledge, but its presentation more than compensates. The Tower of Quantum Trials provides us with the quantum rule required just to land on the quantum moon. Once we've landed on the moon, we must draw from the remaining 2 quantum rules to travel from the South Pole and reach the North. I must commend Mobius for providing the hidden pieces of the puzzle to their players, then sending them off to piece everything together themselves without handholding. I'd be remiss if I talked about the quantum moon without our dear buddy Solanum. Solanum is probably the best reward I could have received for reaching the end of the quantum moon journey. First of all, we've seen the Nomai's writing staves in a few different locations throughout the star system. Finally, after we spent hours and hours translating Nomai text, Solanum demonstrates exactly how Nomai used to write with these writing devices. Since we rely entirely on the Nomai scrolls for information, Solanum's demonstration is extremely fascinating and satisfying. With the question and a concern, Solanum helps set the tone for the upcoming last stretch of the game before the Eye of the Universe. Solanum asks, conscious observation forces a quantum object to collapse to a single possibility, but what would happen if a conscious observer somehow entered the Eye itself? Sometimes more context can increase our curiosity for a mystery. Solanum confirms the link between the quantum moon and the eye of the universe, essentially wrapping up some of the minor quantum moon and eye mysteries. However, with our newfound knowledge, new questions emerge. Solanum asks probably the most relevant and thought-provoking question: what happens when we observe the quantum eye from within? The best mysteries often unravel from resolutions only to unveil new mysteries. Solanum continues in another dialogue tree. When I was a child, I used to believe the eye was malevolent, to have lured my clan to the star system only to then vanish from them so completely, but I don't fear the eye anymore. In fact, it became my fondest hope to see the eye someday, but I fear this may be beyond my reach. You may think I'm strange, but I have a hypothesis that I may not be entirely alive. Perhaps my journey has reached its end. Something messed up definitely happened to Solanum when she died while in the Quantum Moon's 6th location. She isn't aware of her own existence as long as she's alone and not observed at the 6th location. Otherwise she'd know that she died, and also that 281,042 years have passed since her death. Solanum is probably a play on Schrodinger's cat, where she's both alive and dead until observed. We observe her alive on the 6th location and dead on the other 5. Anyway, I really don't want to leave her behind, and Mobius capitalizes on that feeling.
Oh,
I know.
so
It's sad that you have to leave him.
I know. I like your fingers. Pretty neat. Rockin' bod you got.
Yeah, I choose her as my soulmate. Before we venture to Ember Twin, let's appreciate what happens when you decide not to use the autopilot system.
Oh, shoot. That one's in front of it. Crap.
Hello, son.
Dude.
In all seriousness, the autopilot system should not exist. Since Outer Wilds focuses so heavily on astrophysics, the game should encourage players to engage with the astrophysics. Some of Outer Wilds' most memorable moments relate to the astrophysics and the crazy player mistakes that ensue. The great thing about Outer Wilds' astrophysics is that it's even fun and entertaining to fail. And if the player dies from it, who cares? You maintain your knowledge and ship logs so nothing of value is lost. Outer Wilds should encourage mechanical mastery in both the suit and the ship to balance out the heavy focus on reading text and the Nomai's generally uninteresting architecture. As long as autopilot exists, Outer Wilds does not encourage mechanical mastery in the ship, since players take the path of least resistance. At least Slate did not fix the autopilot's avoidance system, since the avoidance system would make the autopilot even more mindless than it already is. Throughout our Outer Wilds journey, we're blessed with the Little Scout. But what can our Little Scout even do? According to the inside of our ship, see beyond the horizon, illuminate dark areas, detect hazards, and test the environment. I maybe used the Scout for illuminating dark areas twice, inside Timber Hearth's mining site 2B and inside Ember Twin's dark caves. Even then, we're equipped with the sufficient flashlight, and Ember Twin's sand pushes the player to constantly and quickly move, so we most likely forget about the Scout's illumination capability. The Scout's ability to detect hazards is underutilized and unrealized because we can only detect ghost matter with it. And why would we shoot our Scout to detect ghost matter when we can instead snap pictures to much more reliably detect and reveal ghost matter? Surprisingly, ghost matter is the extent of detect hazards. Even though the test the environment image includes a Hearthian testing Giant Deep's water spouts with the Scout, we'll most likely instead let the water spouts run their natural course. We'll witness them shooting islands into the air before we even think to shoot our Scout into them. Maybe we test Brittle Hollow's black hole, but honestly I never thought to since I assumed the black hole was dangerous until the game told me to jump in, and at that point why bother testing? The Scouts Test the Environment application is surprisingly unrealized in Outer Wilds since there's little to nothing to test. Honestly, between detect hazards and test the environment, I expected to test foreign substances on these strange planets. Unfortunately, the only time I found a substance strange enough for me to test was the gray matter inside the eye locator sites. I still have no idea what that creepy stuff is. The most useful and common scout application is See Beyond the Horizon, or to simply scout out the unknown from safety. Timberhearth's geysers, areas behind impassable grates found on half of the planets, dark brambles everything, and interlopers everything. When I think of the Little Scout, I think of See Beyond the Horizon. Surprisingly, the ship's scout diagram excludes 3 other applications: Read Integrity, Snap Pictures, and Mark Locations. As previously discussed, the Integrity Reader isn't useful, so we can keep Read Integrity off the list. Snap Pictures, on the other hand, encapsulates 2 major Outer Wilds systems or obstacles: ghost matter and quantum objects. See Beyond the Horizon also relies on snapping pictures, but we mostly hold the scout in our hands when we snap pictures of ghost matter and quantum objects. We can leave our scout on objects to mark them as waypoints for easier navigation and as solutions for puzzles. Dark Bramble's main gimmick excellently emphasizes and relies on our ability to mark waypoints by shooting the scout into small bramble nodes. The scout's ability to mark waypoints is also extremely useful for Brittle Hollow's Tower of Quantum Knowledge, and even explicitly encouraged for Ember Twin's anglerfish fossil. So Outer Wilds excellently capitalizes on the scout's ability to mark locations as waypoints. Overall, the Little Scout can be extremely useful at times. However, Outer Wilds' star system doesn't contain enough tailored content and scout applications to justify half of the Little Scout's capabilities. Thankfully, at least the game doesn't suffer for the inclusion of the Scout's unused or seldom used capabilities. I like to think of the Scout's weak capabilities as opportunities that Mobius could not utilize or take advantage of within the scope of the game. Outer Wilds is not a short game, so I completely understand why the Scout's versatility remains as untapped potential. Outer Wilds' underlying time management loop does not bog down the player experience. In fact, we hardly pay any mind to the time loops after the first few or so. If implemented poorly, the time loops would become an annoyance and consistently cut players off of the middle of their discoveries and excavations. Additionally, we want most, if not every, time loop to impart something useful to the player, whether information or an experience. To prevent the time loops from developing into a gimmicky nuisance, Mobius carefully designed the time loop and integrated it into multiple facets of the game's design. Firstly, Mobius decided on a comfortable time limit for the time loop that they could design around, 22 minutes per time loop. It takes roughly 22 minutes for people to mentally fully focus on something, so the time loop length provides players a buffer time loop instead of eating into a more lengthy time loop. Additionally, 22 minutes is short enough to fit into a busy schedule, yet long enough for players to consistently discover something useful. Secondly, Outer Wilds stops time whenever the player reads Know My Text, so slow readers don't feel rushed or punished for taking their time, and Mobius no longer has to consider slow readers when they decide on the time loop's time limit. Thirdly, Mobius designed each route in Discovery for players to comfortably explore and consume within any given 22-minute time loop. For some of the discoveries that require most or a chunk of a time loop to navigate and consume, obstacles block off or limit their routes and access over time, such as Ember Twin Sand that blocks off areas like the High Energy Lab, or Brittle Hollow's Structural Integrity that increases navigational difficulty over time, or the Interloper's Elliptical Orbit that crashes into the sun partway through the time loop. Fourthly, each planet contains several landmarks and nothing outside of the landmarks to ensure players don't waste a time loop exploring every nook and cranny of planet surfaces. The landmark system works especially well because it's much more time and resource efficient for Mobius compared to extremely detailed surfaces that fascinate and draw us in. The landmark system overall hands Mobius more control over the game's pacing and where the player may explore. And fifthly, the endgame feels way more significant because for the first time, the player is completely free of the time restraint. Outer Wilds also controls each time loop's pacing through the oxygen and fuel systems.
I think that's probably a valid tutorial.
The oxygen and fuel systems essentially act as tethers and guidance systems to ensure players push forward to reach and explore important areas within any given 22-minute time loop. The oxygen system serves as a strict timer so you don't carelessly wander away from your ship without a destination in mind. Every important location contains trees that refill the oxygen tank, so trees essentially mark areas as mini checkpoints within the strict 22-minute time limit. The oxygen system provides additional player motivation to reach the next notable area and also a satisfactory sigh of relief if we reach trees just before our tank is empty. When the oxygen tank runs low, we either press onward to the next tree checkpoint or retreat back to the last checkpoint. When the fuel tank runs low, on the other hand, we must retreat all the way back to our ship since fuel deposits are virtually non-existent. Outer Wilds justifies the harsher fuel penalty because we directly control how much fuel we consume in any given trip. The fuel system is not a strict timer, it's an efficiency sub-game that we must manage responsibly. The fuel system also encourages you to consciously land your ship in a safe and accessible place even when you don't need to depend on the ship for oxygen. An empty oxygen tank results in death. Outer Wilds justifies death as a consequence because death is only a minor setback and oxygen refill in trees are very common. If you run out of oxygen, it's entirely your fault, whether because of poor time management, poor ship placement, or navigational incompetency. An empty fuel tank, on the other hand, results in a much weaker jetpack that quickly consumes oxygen. While an empty fuel tank doesn't result in death, because it's a fuel tank, it creates moments where players might fear death because they'll have to come back to finish what they were exploring if they die. Since that's the only reason to fear death in Outer Wilds, empty fuel tanks can put players in tense situations that result in some of the more memorable moments in the game. The oxygen and fuel systems can also force us back up to our ship on the surface, which can encourage us to check out other landmarks or at the very least refresh our memory with the ship log and reinforce landmarks and paths so they're easier to remember. Additionally, the oxygen and fuel systems provide us with more tangible reasons to master and become efficient in the game's astrophysics and mechanics. Sometimes it's just not possible for us to completely explore large underground areas in a single time loop, like Brittle Hollow's Hanging City or Ember Twin's Sunless City. Enter the shortcut. Without a shortcut, the lengthy path to the Sunless City becomes tedious and repetitive to navigate across multiple time loops. With a shortcut, we can hop right back into the Sunless City to continue exploration. However, the game should hide the shortcut well enough where we cannot accidentally stumble across it and compromise the satisfaction of finding the shortcut from within the Sunless City. Thankfully, Outer Wilds' shortcuts are extremely well hidden. Moreover, players won't actively search for shortcuts since the game conditions them to not explore outside of the landmarks. The Sunless City is a dark, sunless city that contains 4 light switches. The light switches turn the Sunless City into a much more manageable place to explore, but their usefulness for navigation extends further. Of course, naturally, we want to flip all 4 switches to light up the entire city. However, if we flip only one on, then we know exactly where that specific location is. The heights of the light switches hint at which level the landmarks can be found, but only flipping one light on highlights exactly where we need to fly to. Next, we venture to a very small planet that Nomai quite extensively mined out, Ash Twin. Ash Twin comprises the Ash Twin Project and the Warp Towers. There's 1 Warp Tower per planet, except Dark Bramble and the addition of a Sun Station Tower. The Warp Towers all represent their destination in some way. The Giant's Deep Tower resembles a cyclone. The Timber Hearth's Tower contains trees. The Ember and Ash Twin Towers connect. The top of the Sun Station Tower resembles the Nomai symbol for the sun. The Brittle Hollow Tower resembles basalt rocks. Out of the 6 warp towers, 3 are useful and important. The warp towers for Brittle Hollow, Sun Station, and Ash Twin. Brittle Hollow's Black Hole Forge, as previously discussed, involves the Brittle Hollow Warp Tower. The Brittle Hollow Tower hints at the tower's connection to the Black Hole Forge. In case the player stumbles across Ash Twin's towers before Brittle Hollow, the Brittle Hollow Tower encourages a trip to the White Hole Station for context. The only way to safely travel to the Sun Station is ironically through the extremely unsafe Sun Station Warp Tower. How many times can a player attempt to navigate the Sun Station Tower before they give up?
Is that even possible? Shoot. Shoot. Shoot.
It's really difficult.
Yeah. Dang it.
You're gonna have to use the spacebar boost.
Yeah. It's just weird because sometimes it's enough to lift the one is enough to lift me up.
Only if you have initial jump momentum, I think. Oh, you landed on something. Oh, don't freak out! Get out! Jump! Jump!
I'm good as long as I don't move.
What the crap? I didn't know that.
Shoot. Well. Dang it. Shoot. Shoot. Shoot.
This seems completely... Oh, no, there's still everlasting damage.
Shoot. Dang it.
The game presents the Sun Station Tower as a difficult cactus hallway to navigate, but it's actually a puzzle in disguise. The solution is for us to show up at the exact moment when the sand reveals the tower's door. Ember Twin acclimates us to the sand and how it can influence our navigation options, so the Sun Station Tower should provide a satisfying puzzle to solve. Unfortunately, the player is more likely to accidentally stumble across the solution than to intentionally solve it. The sand allows entry into the Sun Station Tower at the beginning of the time loop, so we'll stumble upon the solution if we die in the cacti hallway, then immediately travel back to try again. Despite the chance of accidentally stumbling across the solution, thankfully the Sun Station opens at the beginning of the time loop. Otherwise, we'd have to stand around to wait for the Sun Station Tower to open for an incredibly long amount of time. We'd be frustrated if we failed to navigate the cacti tunnel and we weren't allowed to try again within a reasonably short amount of time. The campfire's doze-off function would not help since it doesn't accelerate time that dramatically. There would also be a good chance you'd oversleep and have to restart the time loop since there's no campfire near the tower. The most important warp tower of them all is the Ash Twin Tower. The Ash Twin Tower warps us into the Ash Twin core where the Ash Twin project resides. To warp into the Ash Twin core, we must enter specifically the middle of the sand column while it's directly overhead the Ash Twin Tower. This Ash Twin project puzzle is by far the most difficult and arbitrary pseudo-puzzle in Outer Wilds. When we stand on the Ash Twin Tower's black hole warp pad and the sand arrives, the sand lifts us off of the warp pad and pulls us toward Ember Twin. The sand essentially represents a hand pulling us away from the target. I like to imagine it's Chert's hand pulling me home into his loving embrace. The Ash Twin Tower's solution requires the player to wait under a ceiling until half of the sand column passes, then walk into the hollow part of the sand column. Why is the middle of the sand column hollow? Frankly, it's absurdly irrational. However, Outer Wilds doesn't leave the player with an overwhelmingly empty slate. The Ash Twin Tower is, in fact, consistent with the Ember Twin Tower. The Ember Twin Tower also activates once the sand column flies overhead. Additionally, the player cannot attribute the Ash Twin Tower's puzzle to anything but the sand column since no other factors visually come into play. Therefore, Ash Twin at least provides enough clues for the player to form a nonsensical, lousy hypothesis and then blindly experiment. The second piece of the pseudo-puzzle involves an unexplained mechanic. We know that a black hole warp sender only activates once it faces its white hole receiver counterpart. Unfortunately, we're not aware of any Ash Twin white hole counterpart, and even if we were aware, how do the warp pads align if they're on the same planet? Well, the idea is that a black hole pad only activates when it aligns with its alignment white hole pad, but the warp destination can be set to a different white hole pad. So the Ash Twin Tower's black pad activates once it aligns with the Ember Twin's white pad, but the Nomai set the destination to the Ash Twin Core's white pad. The fact that warp alignment can be different from warp destination is only ever vaguely implied in the Black Hole Forge, and for some reason a couple Outer Wilds patches changed some of the Black Hole Forge text to make it even more confusing. The combination of the virtually unexplained warp alignment and destination differentiation and the nonsensical hollow sand column phenomenon creates the most frustrating and confusing attempt at a puzzle in Outer Wilds. Mobius needed something difficult to keep players away from the Ash Twin Core for as long as possible. The Ash Twin Core must be the absolute most difficult location to uncover in the entire game because it spoils most of the game. However, entering the Ash Twin Core is driven by necessitated difficulty through incomplete means instead of well-grounded and coherent lore and mechanics. Outer Wilds should contain a series of hidden bits of knowledge that we piece together, so by the end we have a fairly complete picture on how to operate the Ash Twin Tower's device. The Ash Twin Core contains important text detailing the Ash Twin project, and more importantly, the project's advanced warp core. I love seeing people's reactions once they realize the implications of removing the Ash Twin project's power source.
Well, I got it now. I guess I'll just leave.
I love how the music stopped. Now, what would happen if you were to die, I wonder?
Oh no. So I haven't turned off the thing that makes the sun blow up. Have I?
So the sun station failed when they originally designed it.
Yeah.
And the sun station tells you that the sun has reached the end of its natural life cycle.
Welp. Peace.
You're just gonna fly as far away as possible?
That's the plan.
You realized what you've done, and now you're like, ah! The existential dread is slowly creeping in. Instead of putting the power source back in.
Well, I figured it was too late. Goodbye, son.
It would be the greatest thing in the world if you just ran to the eye of the universe. Oh my gosh, the music just stopped.
The sun disappeared!
Oh my gosh. Does that mean it blew up?
I think it blew up.
Or you're just out of range?
It was like 1,500 kilometers away, so...
Any second now. Right?
I'm still firing, though. Well,
The rest of the Ash Twins warp towers only exist because they have to for the story, but useless warp towers are preferable. If every single warp tower led to some hidden place, then Ash Twin would become very predictable and a tedious planet to complete, since warping demands a great deal of the player's time to sit around staring at the sky like a buffoon. Ash Twin contains one last structure, the 2 solar towers that power the Ash Twin project. Even though the solar towers offer elevators and platforms, they're completely devoid of anything of interest. It's inconsistent that these towers look like landmarks but offer nothing of value. The solar towers wouldn't stand out as empty landmarks if they didn't contain elevators and platforms. The Sun Station provides absolutely fascinating information about the station's role in the Ash Twin project, or lack thereof. The Sun Station failed. The station also provides the exact number of years it's been since the Nomai's extinction, 281,042 years. After the Sun Station's failure, I bet the Nomai's next solution would be akin to a Dyson sphere, if only the interlopers' ghost matter didn't kill them all. The Sun Station failed right before the Nomai checked out the interloper, so we discover Idea facing the sun alone on a bench and clutching an Ash Twin projection stone. She passed away with feelings of guilt and contemplating their failure after all the wasted effort. The placement of Idea's remains is one of the most impactful environmental storytelling moments in the game. Anyway, we've already discussed the Sun Station Tower. However, there's another method by which we can enter the Sun Station.
hopefully I'm still in line with it. No.
This is super intense.
Dang it. I can't burn hard enough. I just gotta wait. because the idea is that my orbit is rounder, or not rounder, is wider than its, so it should be going around faster than me. But whenever the numbers turn red, I'm going away from it, which means my orbit is in the longer part of the ellipse. And when it's blue, it means it's in the shorter part of the ellipse. So whenever it's red, I just have to keep burning toward the thing itself, because if I don't, and slightly retro, because the idea is I'm trying to slow myself down in orbit, but also, yeah, I'm gonna blow up.
You mean like the lock-on changes?
Well, you see how it's switching between going toward it and going away from it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm, like... Shoot. Because I'm trying to keep those numbers between, like, -20 and +20 so that my orbit stays fairly circular. But it's really difficult because your ship is only so powerful. And when the numbers get super low like that, it means I'm getting too far away. I should be coming back around soon. Shoot. And if it doesn't have a little docking thing on it, then I'm screwed either way. Because there's no way I'll be able to match it perfectly. Shoot. Shoot. Man, that was close. Where is it? It should have come back around by now.
Maybe you're
Unless
matching its speed.
Yeah.
Now you're not matching its speed, probably.
There we go.
There it is.
You like that?
I love this, yeah.
I bet you didn't do this when you were playing.
I did not. Oh, you're a little bit...
This is nerve-wracking. I love it.
This is awesome.
At least I'll be able to get a good view of it.
I will say I know it's at least possible to do it this way.
keep ending up upside down. No! No! Come on, let me move! Oh. Oh.
Was the gravity too strong?
Ah! Uh-oh.
Oh,
That
no.
sound wasn't good.
That didn't sound good at all. Open the hatch. Can you match velocity on it? Hold space. Not on the sun, on the...
Yeah. It's too late. It's gone. Oh. Well,
Your
bye.
ship. Your ship.
Darn it, dude. It's so close.
Dark Bramble is simple but effective. It's an unknown void obfuscated by fog and thick roots and filled with dimensional pockets and lurking beasts. Quite fittingly, Dark Bramble remains the most mysterious and deadly of all the planets for both Hearthians and Nomai alike. To keep with the theme, Dark Bramble expects us to utilize both our Signal Scope and Scout to effectively navigate without getting lost in the fog. The parasitic Dark Bramble also expels bramble seeds to crash on other planets and consume them. Luckily, the seed on Giant's Deep did not affect the planet. Timber Hearth, on the other hand, their freshly crashed bramble seed will either kill off the Hearthians or force them to relocate. Whether or not a player fears the terrifying Dark Bramble entirely depends on the player. My buddy wasn't scared by mostly anything because, as discussed, death bears no consequence. Even then, Dark Bramble contains the ingredients for a potentially terrifying recipe.
It be working.
It totally worked. I'm full of crap. I know I am.
Oh gosh, there's one down there too. Come on.
Okay, I think I...
Yeah, see, I don't think it's not noticeable.
It definitely heard me.
I didn't see how much gas you used.
Ah!
Oh, oh baby! Oh, it scared me, man.
Oh my gosh, you should have seen me!
Did you jump?
I was freaking out! Oh no, I'm all hot and sweaty!
Good.
Some may not fear Dark Bramble. Me, on the other hand, Dark Bramble can lick my butthole. But not like, oh yeah, I love Dark Bramble so much that it licks my butthole every night. Rather, ugh, stay away from my butthole, please. Anglerfish fit extraordinarily well with Dark Bramble's theme because both the node entrances and the anglerfish emit light sources. So not only are we flying through a foggy void, but we don't know if the light ahead of us is friend or foe. Unless, of course, we use our scout. We already know about Dark Bramble's anglerfish from the Tutorial Village's museum. Since the museum's anglerfish is only a baby, our first encounter with the full-grown adult ones can surprise us. However, if we visit Ember Twin's anglerfish fossil before Dark Bramble, we now expect full-grown ones in Dark Bramble, so they're no longer a surprise. If we don't know what's inside Dark Bramble, then the anglerfish would be a much more effective surprise to unexpectedly run into during our first Dark Bramble voyage. So either the anglerfish fossil should be removed, or the museum's baby anglerfish should be removed and Ember Twin should not mention that the fossil is not from Ember Twin. Feldspar though. Phew, what a hunk of generic minerals as the most abundant group of minerals in our crust. Feldspar makes up over 50% of our crust. Feldspars are also important constituents of gabbro and basalt. And frankly, I don't like the idea that a piece of feldspar is always inside of gabbro. Feldspar could have been named something less generic, like the common feldspars, orthoclase, albite, and anorthite. Those are terrible names, but at least they represent ingenuity and uniqueness. I'm searching for a more conspicuous dating candidate. Overall, Feldspar's parents should be ashamed. On our way to the vessel, we pass through the dreadful red node. Oh, you know the one. Yeah, you do. 3 anglerfish line up eager to eat at the drop of a single loud thrust from your ship. Up to this point, anglerfish have acted as fake nodes that discourage reckless flight. The red node flips the table since the anglerfish confront us head on and force us to know how to handle them. However, we shouldn't have to clip through pieces of the anglerfish to travel through unharmed. Perhaps Mobius allowed our ship to clip through pieces of them to encourage us to move and die if we're unfamiliar with their blindness. While I'm not convinced that clipping is a necessary evil, the positives certainly outweigh the negatives. The Red Bramble node contains a second unique phenomenon, anglerfish eggs. The eggs justify the baby anglerfish in the museum, but honestly, I'd rather see the museum's baby anglerfish gone and instead some of these eggs hatch from within Dark Bramble throughout the time loop. If we're too close to the hatched eggs, then baby anglerfish latch onto our ship and never let go. They'd be completely harmless, but it'd be much better to experience than simply reading about it in the museum. Once we've flown past the anglerfish trio, we can follow our scout's waypoint to the correct node where the vessel lies. Thankfully, we can, in future trips, mark the vessel as a waypoint from our ship log once we've discovered it. The vessel serves as the most important structure and home to Nomai as a species. Overall, Outer Wilds conveys the vessel's story and cultural importance extremely well. Brittle Hollow illustrated that Dark Bramble grabbed the vessel and one of the escape pods, but the illustration could not prepare us for the tragedy that ensued. The Nomai's only hope was to use the last of their air supply to follow the closest of the 2 vessel signals. However, as if by some sick joke, the vessel signal emitted from one of the tiny seeds too small to enter. There they perished, and it's certainly a scene to behold.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Darn it. Oops.
Oh
sorry.
my gosh!
Excuse me.
That's so disrespectful. I love it.
You like it.
Brittle Hollow also contains a couple lines from a Nomai who dearly missed and worried for someone from the Dark Bramble escape pod, which was a very nice if heartbreaking touch. Unfortunately, even if the Nomai found their way to the vessel, the warp core is completely trashed. That's a problem for us as well, since we'll need power in order to operate the vessel and warp to the eye of the universe. There are 3 main puzzle pieces to discover before we can warp to the eye of the universe: the Ash Twin Project, the probe tracking module, and the vessel. As discussed, the player must discover the Ash Twin Project toward the end of the game. Thankfully, however, it doesn't matter in which order we discover the 3 main locations, as long as we find all 3. The vessel and the probe tracking module in particular each offer one side of the same coin. If you discover the vessel first, you have the travel method but no target, and you have no idea how to work this thing. If you discover the probe tracking module first, you have the target but no means to travel and no idea what the symbols can be used for. Both situations are equally compelling and rewarding to solve, and leave us with intriguing discoveries and new questions to answer. After we grab the Ash Twin Project's warp core, we mark the vessel as a waypoint and bring the warp core to the vessel to power it. Once the vessel powers up, we enter the Eye of the Universe coordinates found in Giant's Deep's core, and voila! We're at the end game, baby! Thankfully, the ship log documents the Eye of the Universe coordinates, so we don't have to write them down or take a picture from our phone. I'm also grateful for the eye coordinates that pop up in the lower left corner of the screen. However, every playthrough I've seen, mine included, never noticed the eye coordinates pop onto the HUD. Most of the comments I've seen as well say they never noticed it. The HUD eye coordinates don't exist for a significant amount of the player base, and that's a problem. The coordinates should pop onto the HUD in a noticeable fashion, otherwise players most likely miss it and instead input the coordinates from memory or from the photo they snapped on their phone. The vessel also contains the one and only present-day message board. We read messages emitted from other Nomai clans. They mention that their ancestors searched for this vessel's clan and never found them. They can also tell that the universe is dying, so they decide to all group together in one star system for safety. It's utterly fascinating and memorable to hear from other Nomai clans themselves after reading about some of their culture and how the story of this vessel's disappearance passed down generations to still be told 281,000 years later. This message board also helps put some of the star system's Nomai into perspective and how their sudden disappearance has affected the species as a whole. The ship log is our best friend, not only for the eye coordinates, but for every noteworthy piece of information throughout the entire game. The ship log documents every discovery so we don't have to on real pen and paper. Without the ship log, we'd stop every 2 seconds to not only write down new information, but heavily organize it, and that would destroy the game's pacing and overwhelm players. The ship log serves another purpose as well. Without the ship log, what happens if the player accidentally discovers something important without realizing it? The ship log documents, organizes, and also informs when we find something of particular value. For example, the ship log documents Brittle Hollow's 3 murals showing the fates of the vessel and its 3 escape pods. Since the game notifies us when it adds information to our ship log when we stare at the 3 murals, we realize that these drawings are more significant than we previously realized, so we're more likely to draw meaning from them and remember them. If you fly through the wrong bramble nodes, you'll always end up in the same recursive dead end. This dead end contains a single node and an anglerfish, and the node leads back into the same dead end. If we exit the dead end, we pop back outside of Dark Bramble. This progress reset prevents players from quickly trial and error testing every node for the correct one without using their brain. However, since death in Outer Wilds is meaningless, why not trap the player inside the dead end for the rest of the time loop as a consequence? Maybe Mobius can add additional objects forever lost when they fell into this recursive nightmare. In fact, Mobius did add a secret Easter egg in this space. Somewhere behind the anglerfish lies a very well-hidden seed. We can shoot our scout inside to reveal a room from the game Elsinore. Ends up, Outer Wilds' art director Wesley Martin also worked as an artist on Elsinore. So, we near the end of Outer Wilds. I appreciate everyone who has journeyed this far with me into the game's design. I hope you'll subscribe and stick around for the future. I hope you'll be the feldspar to my Gabbro. At long last, the Eye of the Universe. We unlock the Eye of the Universe by uncovering the Big Three: the coordinates in Giant's Deep's core, the advanced warp core in Ash Twin's core, and the vessels somewhere in Dark Bramble. We learn about the Big Three's significance throughout the star system, so our slow and eventual discovery of them is ever the more satisfying. The satisfaction grows further once we piece together every story beat and discovery and realize what our final journey entails. At long last, we learn that our journey to the Eye of the Universe is possible, and we're about to finally complete what the Nomai set out to do over 281,000 years ago. Once we take out the Ash Twin Project's warp core and exit the Ash Twin core, the music track called Final Voyage begins to play. Final Voyage expands on the End Times theme previously discussed. Final Voyage is wonderfully nostalgic, yet excitingly new and more layered and impactful. We strongly associate Final Voyage with inevitable death because we recognize the all-too-familiar End Times track within. In the case of Final Voyage, though, that inevitable death is canonically permanent since we just shut down the Ash Twin Project by pulling out the power source. Therefore, when a player hears Final Voyage, they're most likely also hearing, "You better know the implications of what you just did, and you better know what you're doing with that warp core." The musician behind the music, Andrew Prallo, deserves every bit of praise he receives for his work here. When you reach Dark Bramble to venture to the vessel, Dark Bramble drastically muffles the music. This change in Final Voyage works extremely well for two reasons. First of all, the muted music fits very well with Dark Bramble's expansive dimensional space. The inside of Dark Bramble is like its own tiny universe completely cut off from the outside. Second, the combination of the muffled music and Dark Bramble's expansive nothingness leaves a great deal of room for players to think. We're left with time and space for cautious anticipation, inner thought, and the ultimate curiosity for the eye that has built up over the course of the game, not to mention a whole shipload of anxiety. We're potentially approaching the very thing we were right next to when we were on the Quantum Moon's 6th location. We're not just doing this for ourselves, but for our poor friend and lover, Solanum. Once we input the coordinates into the vessel, we're treated with the most breathtaking sight of the Eye of the Universe. The game feels overtly railroaded once we jump into the black hole to warp onto the outside of the eye. The game should very much railroad once we jump into the eye itself, but I would love to savor the moment by traveling from the vessel to the outside of the eye myself without instantly warping onto it. Also, maybe the journey to the eye should allow more freedom. That way the eye feels more like a real place to discover like everything else we've explored up to this point. Either way, everything that leads up to the eye is a memorable experience. We approach the gargantuan quantum storm, walk through partial darkness and a cacophony of lightning and strange quantum noises, and finally we jump into the eye. The rest is history. We explore the potential museum reality from our mind. We then gather each of our fellow Hearthian astronauts. Unfortunately, these are just the eye's manifestations of our Hearthians from our memory, but I suppose it's the thought that counts. Our minds swarm with a variety of feelings as everyone plays the all-too-familiar Hearthian tune together for the first time during the game. And then silence. Even though it's heartwarming to gather the crew together one last time, there's nothing but somberness and the road ahead once you realize Solanum and the rest aren't real. The Hearthians and Solanum only say what we think they'd say if they were actually here for this moment. Additionally, I, as the player, would only consider Solanum as a friend at this point. The Hearthians encouraged us sometimes, but otherwise they didn't really help. And in the end, it's us who have to pull the trigger on the sphere of possibilities to collapse it into a single instance. Our journey throughout the game is ours and ours alone, and now we stand here to finish it, still alone. And yet, despite the solo voyage, the essence of our friends and our experiences fed the Eye's possibility sphere. When we entered the Eye pulled the essence out of what we know, from the people, places, and our experiences. By jumping into the sphere and collapsing all of the possibilities, you essentially create a new universe that is of you and your essence, including your friends. All of the wonder and tenacity of your people, along with the ingenuity and thirst for discovery of the Nomai, created a new universe of equally infinite possibilities. It's the happiest ending a story about a dying universe could have. Outer Wilds isn't about saving the universe, it's about creating a new universe so others have a chance of living, even though there's nothing in it for us and we're dying either way. Our journey was somber and lonely, but beautiful and selfless. Outer Wilds is extremely well designed, and Mobius Digital deserves recognition for it. Outer Wilds is the exploration game to rival all exploration games. It's insanely entertaining to play with the astrophysics alone, and the Forgiven time loop system gives us the freedom to enjoy said astrophysics and experiment. Each planet behaves as its own unique and possible playground. They are beautifully terrifying to explore, contain fascinating mysteries and puzzles to solve, and slowly unravel the bigger picture for an overall satisfying journey. Outer Wilds relies entirely on the player obtaining knowledge, then applying that knowledge to the star system around them. The game offers freedom unlike any other, yet it's so incredibly tightly and carefully designed to guide the player. Outer Wilds is truly one of the best game design case studies I've ever laid my hands on. I'm curious to see what Mobius Digital works on next. I'd like to propose an Outer Wilds style game in the vein of Rain World. I'd have nightmares for years. Whoa, man. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. Who will take first place as the most dateable soulmate in the Outer Wilds universe? I don't know, probably some nice woman in whichever star system contains Earth. These Hearthians are always gabroing my body and churning me. They shall no longer take me for granted, although I'm not very tough, but you catch the gist of it. At least I don't live in Flint, Michigan. At this point, I'll leave you with bonus material that's either amusing or I couldn't find a place for in the commentary. If you'd like to see more game design videos like these, please consider subscribing to the channel and help out by liking the video and sharing it with your buddies. If you'd like to support me financially so I can work on game design videos full time, please consider contributing to my Patreon in the description. For now, I set my Patreon to a per video basis, so you really get a lot of bang for your buck since I've invested over 300 hours in this video alone. I appreciate every viewer and comment regardless, so thank you very much for your time. I'm very grateful. Love ya.
Is there a, That was so cool!
What?
The moon was on my screen, and I blinked when I woke up, and then it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah, that sounds kind of rare. That's incredible.
I like how the shell just eventually starts being held up by nothing. Like, so much of it isn't even connected anymore. It just kind of floats.
I like how it doesn't make sense, but it still makes sense within the context of this universe.
Yeah. Oh, hey, my ship followed me again.
I like how you went through the black hole at the exact time where you can just enjoy your death.
Don't worry, I got this. I know how to fix this.
Oh no. What's your plan? Oh, I knew it.
I've never seen the sun explode while I'm inside this.
What are you want to check out Dark Bramble for a second?
For 1 second. See if I can get a gravity assist from the other planet. Goodbye, sun.
That kind of scared me. Like, what was that?
There we go. Oh, cool.
I know, right?
He's going pretty slow, isn't he? I guess at this point in his orbit, he's speeding back up.
Oh, I guess it would speed up around the sun.
Yeah, because the farthest point, the highest point in its orbit is the slowest point, and then the fastest point is the lowest point, if you wanted to know.
Makes sense.
Oh shoot,
But
that's
also the sun!
I guess we're at its fastest point. Alright, we've matched its orbit. Good job, everyone.
You're sliding around.
I think?
I think you're sliding around. That's awesome.
Yeah. Woo! How close? Shoot. Okay. Shoot.
I love Quantum, dude. Quantum's awesome.
Okay.
Whoa!
Okay.
Okay. That was a bug.
great.
That was definitely not supposed to happen.
Oh shoot. Alright, I wanted to figure out what that was. That's why I came here.
Instead, you dove headfirst into a giant tornado.
Don't judge me.
No, you were supposed to do that at some point. I'm just surprised that you wanted to do that.
It's fun. I like puzzles.
Oh yeah. No, but like that big cyclone like scared the crap out of me when I played. I'm a scaredy pants, dude.
Yeah. Well, there's not like there's really any repercussion for dying. Not really.
Dude, but you lose your life.
Yeah, but it's fine.
Was it still partially covered in ice?
Yeah, I think. Yes. Did you see that? That
What,
was
did it
beautiful.
crash?
It ran right into the planet and just bumped. Shoot.
Whoa! Oh, that scared the crap out of me. What did you get hit by?
I have no idea. Wait. Are you freaking kidding me?
I know where you're headed now.
Freaking quantum cactus? Oh. It's just... What the heck?
What a troll.
The sun.
Hi, son. Oh, hi, Jimmy. Oh, long time no see. You've been acting strange lately. You've become so hot. I've become so cold. Oh, my hydrogen is fusing into helium.
Oh. Ah.
Oh, you found it? Oh no, this is the
This
quantum
is the
rock
place
place.
that I was at. That's why the stupid cactus got me. Oh. Oh.
So I guess to refresh your memory, they told you about this place where they were gonna test that like .001 discrepancy of time, where you
Yeah.
went through the white hole before the dark hole, black hole, whatever.
That's what this is saying.
Of course, of course.
That's something that they did really well.
Oh,
in
yeah.
this.
What the heck is that?
That's the probe?
Oh, is it?
Oops.
Woo!
I guess I should unbuckle. Oh, poop!
Amazing.
Oh, I love this game.
It's awesome.
I got caught up in the stupid probe. I assumed this was uncatchable.
Knock it off course.
Grab it in the hole of my ship. Shoot.
Run into it.
Hello.
Well, I guess that didn't do anything.
Did it not?
Oh, did you?
I think I killed it.
I think you did. Is it not moving anymore?
I mean, technically yes, it's moving, but like,
It says 0.
well, that's because I zeroed out to it, so
Oh.
I could go and look at it.
Yeah, I don't think it's moving anymore. Oh, that's bigger than I thought it was. I swear if there's
neato.
something on it. That looks like death. Oh,
It's
that's just a
nothing.
light. I don't think they ever expected you to check it out. They put
No,
the
they-
eye symbol on it though.
Definitely did.
Yeah, I guess so. They put the eye symbol on it. That's really cool.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem to be anything. I guess they probably didn't want anyone that just started the game to reveal anything major.
Oh, sheesh, what are you doing? Whoa! Oh, Daddy, I'm in the sky. I'm an astronaut now, Daddy. Are you proud of me?
No. How do you... Oh, you can hit Alt and then...
What are you doing?
I just stepped off. Oh, that was beautiful.
Fantastic emergency procedures, Captain.
Shoot.
I mean, it's not flyable anyway.
Yeah, but I could have refueled and crap and gotten oxygen. Don't worry, I got this.
I suppose you still... Oh, no. Dude, that's like the worst spot for it to be. I don't know if you want to... Ow. That sand can and will crush you.
I know. Oh no. No. My ship. My beautiful ship.
Oh, dude, you were safe! Ah! I just imagine that was his screaming during that whole thing.
Ah!
What was that? Like, Christmas sun? Christmas sun?
I like how they do it. I really hope I wasn't making sound right when you did that, so that you can sample that. Sorry, if I had known you were going to make such a beautiful noise, I want to have... Ooh.
Ooh. This building looks mighty interesting. Let's check it out. Why are you trying to destroy your ship? I love how much fun you just have with the physics.
It's good. It's some good stuff.
It is some pretty good stuff.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Okay. Whoa! Oh, jeez, where did that come from? Oh!
Shoot.
No.
Oh. I did not expect that.
What? Oh, it looked like you were gonna bump into them. I didn't know you were gonna just combust. That scared the crap out of me.
Instant 100% damage on everything.
Ah, oh, that's so hot. Look, can it hear you go through and it's trying to get in or something? Are you...
I don't know, dude.
Are you entering the same area over and over?
I have no idea. It kind of seems like it, but I haven't actually been paying attention to my surroundings. I think maybe I am.
Oh my gosh, that creature! Ah, dude!
I'm looking at myself! I'm looking at myself, or the thing trying to eat me.
Dude!
That's what I see when I go through the hole.
Oh, by the way, you can rotate without making noise. It's only the boosters that attract them.
Okay.
Oh, what is... Oh my gosh! What?
I went backwards through it.
Whoa. Distress signal. Oh! Run! Oh, come on!
Dang it. I'm sorry. I'll slow down next time.
That is
hard.
the intention of the planet, is to like take it slow and careful. But it's funny because it doesn't work with you because you're just like so fearless.
Well, I'm invincible. My character is just like, hey, I got another 22 minutes to live my best life. It didn't even make sense. Oh, it's so fast.
Oh, right into the anglerfish. I guess just wait till you're past it. Oh, you're not gonna hit it, are you? Oh my gosh! Hey, so I think we discovered why threading the needle in the red area works.
Wait, what do you mean?
We figured out why it seems like you're clipping through the 3 of them in the red one.
Oh.
Because you
Yeah.
literally are.
Yeah. I guess I don't need to carry this around with me, do I?
Well, you can put it back in the thing if you want to.
Oh, I really... Oh, shoot. Cool! If you run out of fuel!
The momentum! Because there's nothing inside of it except like a mining site, I guess.
As far as you know.
Oh, you're calling me dumb, honey?
Yes.
Because I'll call
honey.
you fat. I want you to cry, baby.
Watch me hit something. Woo!
I swear if that was the correct one, it's not.
Okay. Oh. Oh, dang, man. Oh, dang.
Oh dang, this is not a bramble
Oh,
seed if that's
you're
what you're
right.
thinking.
That would be intense.
That would be.
Man, I abuse my legs so much. It's a good thing this repeats over and over, because I probably fracture my legs every single time. Everything moves so fast.
It kind of has to if for the teleporters to feel like
Yeah.
not the dumbest thing in the world. Oh, daddy, here we go.
Grab it and run.
Run! Run, my child. Run as fast as you can. Death is chasing you now.
Oh, don't say that. That actually gave me chills. Shoot.
Oh my gosh, no!
I'm so good though. Did you see me thread that needle?
With the advanced warp core, yeah.
I'm just living true to my people, dude.
Really, I don't know why we don't like make suicide pacts at high school or something. Like, if it's inevitable at our day job, better prepare, right? Oh man.
The epic music. Flying down the hallway.
Oh, here we are. You don't have to take a picture of it, by the way.
You don't know that?
I do.
Oh, the door is closed. Darn it, I wanted to go out and fly. Hey.
I wonder if that's our son.
Pretty certain it is. I mean, I guess I could let it oh.
I know, right? It's so mean, I hate it.
What happens if you run into it?
It just resets you.
That was pretty neat.
Pretty neat.
Okay.
What
I'm
a backhanded compliment.
I'm odd. I gotta say. Which is something, because it's not something that games do to me anymore.
Right. So yeah, what you jumped into at the end there was basically all the possibilities, or I guess just possibilities. When you jumped into it, you collapsed it into a single possibility, and a new universe was created.
That's pleasant.
It really is. I guess you could say it's a bittersweet ending. You're gonna die anyway. Might as well start the universe anew, right?
Yep. This game would be so easy, though, the second time through. Not just because you know the secrets, but I just mean, like, if it were a new story, but the same mechanics. Because half the game is just learning the mechanics to it.
You mean just like controlling?
Yeah, but, like, also how the game is generally, how it works generally, like with the
Right.
time-dependent stuff and whatnot.
I don't know. Hold on. After this. Wait for it.
Oh, man.
So fun fact, that scout only shows up in this end screen.
If you shoot it through the thing at the end?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing, right?
Yes.
Oh man. Even going into this game blind, I think they made it pretty easy to figure out, like, some stuff is time sensitive and all that jazz.
Yeah. I mean, they give you all the clues you need, definitely. I've never seen a game that gives you the pieces and lets you figure it out to such a degree.
Exactly. And it works.
And most of them don't that try it.
I really want a sequel to this game.
Yeah.
Just like, give me Outer Wilds 2 with just a new star system. I just want new star systems, man. With all the crazy planets to explore.
Yeah. I think what they would really... I mean, that'd be cool, but... I think if they try to build a second one off the same structure, it won't. Because there's only so many different ways that you can mix up an exploration plot like this.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So they'd have to do a radically different setting.
I am still working on that Mario Odyssey series, though.
Gonna say that when you're 40.
I know, right?
And there's Mario Odyssey 72. This game is too good.
Yep.
It has no right to be this good.
That was the reaction I was waiting for.
Like, even the simplest crap. Like, dying under the waterfall was... I don't know. It was just... it was a fun experience to die under that water.
Oh, man.
Died like 4 times before I ever even got off the planet. But that's okay. I could give you 3.
Could you?
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, the map and the ship thing. That's a big one. That's like a really big one considering how much of the game is in your ship. And then...
Well, but even then, the map is just like... shows you relative position. And North and South Pole.
That's the important part, though, because literally everything happens at the North and South Poles.
Yeah, but they show it on the landing gear. And they intended you to use the landing gear.
Yeah.
But it honestly didn't affect my playthrough.
Yeah. Well, it just would have been nice, because at any point you could fly out and see where you are or whatever. There should have been a map. Because my next point is that they didn't have enough objects in the game, like unique entities for you to be able to navigate by anything other than giant landmarks.
I actually watched a documentary on this game, and they explained that they did that on purpose because they didn't want you like scouring every little place of the planets.
I get that, but still, I think it's a valid point, and I think that if they claim that, then they're...
like, the landmarks are... It's not like the planets are big enough to where it matters. Like, the landmarks are, like, close to each other.
It is at first. Because it takes most people at least a night's sleep to create any sort of mental map. And if you don't have things to navigate by, then you have no clue where you are at any point in time until you've slept on it. And then the next time you play, you discover a new planet and you have no idea where you are any of the time until you sleep on it. Can you answer a question for me?
Sure.
At what point did the LD and S break apart?
Oh, the what?
LDS of Wilds.
Oh! I kind of saw it do that, but I didn't realize how bad it got. What is this game where they just
Even
focus...
that's a clue on like what the plot is.
If we stay here for 22 minutes...
Oh
will
my
it
gosh.
Will it revert?
I don't think so. I think it loops. But wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh, is the text going back in? I don't think so.
I don't think so. But the background definitely does loop.
I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree on the small landmark thing.
Oh, I mean they're just... The worlds are empty. Like... And it's good where it counts, like people's houses and crap. But like... I understand that these people lived a long time ago. But like... The fact that there's nothing left but the same 5 wall pieces. Just repeated over the whole game.
Oh, you mean like the variety in the Know My Homes?
Just the variety in everything. Other than the characters. And the ships are cool. I don't know. There's so much detail put into some things and then absolutely none in others. And it's just strange to see that disparity.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't recorded so I can see the text just, whoa. Just blow
Is it
out.
constantly moving?
It's
or
still
did it
moving.
do it? Really?
It's still
That's
moving.
cool. 18.
That's how long we've been on the menu.
Ooh, it's close.
It's close. It's gonna like implode or something.
Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, probably not. What's your third gripe with the game?
I think I combined two. It was the navigational issues, and then yeah, because the blandness of some areas then makes it difficult for navigation, but I mean, the worlds are small enough that if you explore them, that you're not gonna get lost really, but like at the same time, you don't want to be walking down blank corridors for no apparent reason if you're just exploring for the sake of putting together a mental map.
You mean like...
If there's nothing to see in mostly blank areas, then what's
You mean
even
like the
point?
sand caves?
Yeah, that's one location. But like, think about it. Most of what you were doing for the whole game was like looking for the tablets or looking for words or one of the interactive little goo machines or whatever.
Right.
Like, that is the gameplay, more or less.
Yeah, the game is knowledge.
Yeah. But they put enough exploration in it to make what would be a really boring game about finding books to read a really cool game about space adventures. There are not any stars left.
Ah, the universe ended.
There's one last one that's exploding. I'm pretty sure it's been 22 minutes though.
Probably, yeah. So yeah.
It just felt like something was off with it. And at one point I don't know, I kind of got bored for a sec. Just because it was basically do the same thing over and over. I really just wanted to advance the story without having to do the same gameplay motions. Which is why I think without having a guide, it would have been a less cohesive experience. Just because whenever I got frustrated, you gave me enough of a tip to figure it out without having to like do tedious crap to do it, like wait through cycles and observe things, and probably should have been a skip time function.
Oh, I feel like the ship log could have replaced me though.
Yeah, to an extent.
It's
But,
not
like,
like there's
I would
probably
ask
only
you- I asked you multiple times, is there like something I need to wait for here, or can I go on,
Oh.
kind of thing?
Gotcha.
Or if I wait, will this happen? And I feel like I would have spent a lot more 22 minutes on this game if you didn't let me know that things wouldn't happen. Because that also ties into the detail thing. It's like, so much of it is detailed, but then And there's only so many things that these people can think up. And if they leave out details that I expect to be in the game, but then aren't, and it's obviously not their fault.
Right.
I don't know, it felt off what things they decided to put the details in sometimes.
I can't believe all the stars actually explode on the main menu screen.
I know, I'm halfway waiting for them to come back, but then I don't know if it actually loops or not, or if anything's gonna happen.
It's not. It's been way more than 22.
Yeah.
The text is probably not moving anymore. Do you think the surface of the planets is too dull?
Yeah. I also got over it quick. Like, before even leaving the starting planet.
Got over what?
Got over the boring surfaces.
Because then you found some landmark to be interested in?
No, I just got over it. I think that the starting planet's the worst.
So instead of going across the planet searching for that big landmark, you'd rather if there were smaller things as well?
No. See, there's just not an answer to this. Like, yeah, it was dumb to look at, but you get over it. And I'm not saying they should have added more content. It's just, you know, they could have maybe. They might not have. Does it matter? Only sort of.
What a great string of words.
Most of the other planets are fine because they're just... They're rocks, you know? That's what most things are. They all have their own main features, and that's cool. I mainly just mean, like, the villages and... I don't know, you would expect to see trees or something on the main planet. Or on your home planet. But there's... I mainly mean, like, in the villages and crap, because it's like, you look at a wall and it is just a blank wall with a texture slapped on it. And some of them are massive walls that are just blank walls with a texture slapped on them. There's a lot of crap that you can put into something to world build, you know?
Right.
But like the
like it's been
crystal,
inhabited?
Yeah. The crystal shards from the death bomb thing.
The ghost matter?
Yeah, the shards that are sticking out of the wall.
Yeah, I know. I got you.
You know how badly those stick out?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else on the walls, ground, anywhere. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I like the detail, and I don't necessarily think they needed to change the shards. They just needed something else there because there wasn't any other details for those details to hide in. It was like blammo. Like, look, there's shards on the wall. You're gonna die if you go in that hole. Like, most of the time you don't even need to look at the sensor. Because it's like, oh, you see those shards, don't walk on them. But all I'm saying is that there weren't enough details, and so the one detail that they added to the walls and floor stuck out like a sore thumb because it was the game mechanic.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it's cool if you go to a different planet and it's just a rock, 'cause sure, that makes sense. But also, though, you would expect your home planet to have some variability in its landscape other than just these massive monuments to planet. Like, I am planet, I have hill. I have large hill. Like, when I started the game, I was like, whoa, cool. This game has, like, a lot of world in it. But then, like, when I got in the ship, I'm like, wow, there's not much world on this world.
I gotcha. So the contrast is kind of...
Yeah, there's a massive contrast between the areas that you should be and the areas that don't matter. And then within the areas that matter, there's just a lot of details that could have been that weren't.
I guess we'll play Dead Space next.
You have to. I played this for you.
Oh no, I'm definitely going to.
It's not a very long game. And I really want to watch you play it because it'll be hilarious.
Oh, you want to watch me suffer?
Yeah.
Alright, well, I'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.